Good morning and welcome to the pre-agenda interview for Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024, relative to the appointments of Katie Weddick, Joshua Schoeneman, and Larson Scheller as members of the Clean Pittsburgh Commission, and Rachel O'Neill as a member of the Planning Commission. Will the clerk please read the title of the bill?
Bill 989, Resolution Appointment of Katie Weddick as a member of the Clean Pittsburgh Commission with a term to expire September 1st, 2028. Bill 988, Resolution Appointment of Joshua Schoeneman as a member of the Clean Pittsburgh Commission with a term to expire September 1st, 2028. Bill 990, Resolution Appointment of Larson Scheller as a member of the Clean Pittsburgh Commission with a term to expire September 1st, 2028. And Bill 992, Resolution Reappointing Rachel O'Neill as a member of the Planning Commission with a term to expire January 1st, 2030.
Thank you very much. And we will get started with, I think, some brief introductions. We have your resumes in front of us, but Larson, would you like to begin with a brief introduction about yourself and why you're interested in this commission position?
Yeah, hi, I'm Larson Scheller. I am the Recycling Operations Coordinator with Pennsylvania Resources Council. I work predominantly with the City of Pittsburgh, offering collection events for items that are not typically recycled in your curbside recycling, specifically household electronics and household hazardous chemicals. And I feel that the work that I do aligns closely with the mission of the Clean Pittsburgh Commission. And it is also really exciting to think about being on the commission with a bunch of other like-minded individuals that are doing similar important work.
Great, thank you. Katie.
Good morning. I'm Katie Weddick with the City of Pittsburgh Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. I'm the Senior Right-of-Way Manager, so I oversee our permitting and inspection teams. So thinking about, how can we handle what's going on in the right-of-way, making sure things are kept clean and properly permitted, and then kind of addressing the issues that aren't.
Thank you. And Josh.
My name is Joshua Schoeneman. I'm the Collection Events Manager at Pennsylvania Resources Council. I work with the City of Pittsburgh to collect materials that can't be disposed of in curbside trash, like electronics and household chemicals. And we also work with Allegheny County and several of the surrounding counties on that as well. And I look forward to working on the Clean Pittsburgh Commission to pursue their mission of cleaning up and beautifying the city. Sure. Should I repeat that?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, and thanks for being here today. For the record, we're joined by Council Member Barb Warwick and Rachel O'Neill. We see you online. We will be starting with those who are being appointed to the Clean Pittsburgh Commission, and then we'll move on to you. So just so you're aware, we might be a few minutes, and then we'll move on to your interview for the Planning Commission reappointment. Thanks for your patience.
Great, thank you.
All right. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Councilmember Warwick, to see if she has any questions, not to put you on the spot, but if you have any questions for those being appointed for the Clean Pittsburgh Commission.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll just sort of to all three of you, and then you can, answer as. So I'm very interested in, litter is a big problem in the city of Pittsburgh, both on, sort of twofold, both on private properties, right, where we're doing like clean and leans, but also just in the roads, right, on the sides of the roads, on our hillsides, in our neighborhoods. And I am very interested in first of all, I think that keeping the city clean is a core city function, right? Like it's, there's things the county does, there's things the city does, and keeping the city clean is one of the things that the city does. So I'm very interested in mobilizing our DPW Department of Public Works to, in addition to picking up, right, like weekly garbage, household garbage, to also start cleaning our streets. I mean, literally hand picking garbage in our streets and roadways. And I know there's the bill that Councilman Charlie and Councilwoman Strasburger put forward to, for this new ticketing policy for garbage on people's private property. But I guess I just wanted to get well, I'll tell you my thoughts, right? What I would like to see is sort of like a seasonal thing where, we have DPW crews that, we do weeds and overgrowth in the spring and summer. We do garbage, litter in the, once the leaves have fallen. So it would be like around now until the snow starts to fall. And then we do snow in the snow season. And then that's kind of sort of like on a 6-week cycle. And then maybe another litter season after the snow and before the spring, sort of. But I just wanted to get your thoughts. I know there's the gold plan is out there and that kind of thing. And both your thoughts on how that might work. And then also how the commission can move that objective forward, whatever it may, whatever the process may look like.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to go first. I'm not intimately familiar with the gold plan, but I agree that litter is a huge problem. And I think one of the biggest issues to overcome that is access to resources. Folks are less likely to toss something over a hillside or in their yard or hide it behind their garage when there's an easy way to get rid of those things. One of the great ways that we've been able to help work towards a solution to that is bringing collection services to communities. Earlier this year, we worked with your office to bring collection services to your district, and we do every other month we do access to we have household chemical disposal services, and this year for the first time we even brought one into the community. We had a hazardous waste collection at the Frick Environmental Center. We had a great turnout for it, and we had folks who have never come to our service before because it was closer to their community. And neighborhood electronic waste collections and more regular access to resources, I think, is a great way to combat that. And just a conscious, more proactive effort of as you were saying, community involvement can let folks know that we're all working towards a better solution. And I think the commission does a really good job of that with their various programs. Garbage Olympics, I think, was a great example of that recently. And I think we had one of the biggest collections we've ever had for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with the kind of access to resources. And I also think what's really great about this commission is the collaboration, right? You're bringing people from different groups together, which everyone knows a little bit different about what's going on. For me and Domi, we'll get concerned citizens, or we'll hear from even just our inspectors about there's something in the right of way. Like, all we can do is identify the owner and cite them, but we can't do that much in terms of actually removing what needs to be removed from the right of way. So I think, learning from this commission and working with them to see who has the resources to be able to do that and really think kind of more holistically about the cleanup.
Yeah, to go off of mainly what Josh was saying, providing the access to the resources is one of the biggest parts. And I'm seeing that in this job. And even prior to this, I was with Allegheny Cleanways, cleaning up illegal dump sites. And it's really nice now to be working to help to recycle a lot of those items that do get tossed over the hillside. And yeah, in June this year, we did a neighborhood electronic waste collection in Hazelwood, and that had an amazing turnout, and folks were really happy to come by. And be able to get rid of the TV that had been sitting in the yard, or the TV that got dumped in their backyard. And things like that can be really empowering for the community to have access to. So I think having a step like that first, and along with the new policy that was proposed, I think that those go really well hand in hand with each other.
Yeah, I mean, so the Garbage Olympics is, a great example. It's a super event, and but at the same time, I know that while it's wonderful that we have all these volunteers, and I just someone in Hazelwood just came, contacted me about sort of mobilizing a little cleaning crew for the neighborhood. I mean, I really do fundamentally believe that it should not be. We should not be relying on volunteers, right? Like the city, it is a core city function to keep this, and all these programs are great to make it easier to recycle and all those things, but I really would like to see from the commission whether it's a plan, and also educational things. So working with PPS, to really get education about litter. I mean, because that's where you start, right? Like that's where you get people to stop littering in the first place is, when they're young. But to get our DPW department so that they are actively picking up litter, because that, the less litter there's in the street, the less likely you are to throw something on the street, and and our volunteer crews can't be there. I mean, twice a year is wonderful. Garbage Olympics once a year is great, you know, Earth Day and whatever, but it's not getting us where we need to be, I would say. So at any rate, I don't know if you have any response to that, but that's my main concern at this point in terms of like keeping the city clean.
In many ways, we do get to work with DPW. We don't have a huge, I wouldn't say influence on how they execute their duties, but they've always been great partners when we've asked them to be there in support of our work. And I think in general, yeah, that's great. I agree. A core city service.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you all for, volunteering to serve. And thanks for being here. I'll pass it over.
Thank you. Thanks for your questions and answers. So building off of some of those questions and your responses, I know that, the ideal situation might be to have, say, in my mind, like regular, hard to recycle, hard to dispose of events kind of circulating around the city regularly. So yes, they might be in Hazelwood one month, but if you miss that one, it's coming next month at the neighborhood next door and the neighborhood next door. Mm-hmm. And I know that the challenge, honestly, in disposing of items properly and recycling in general is that the economics nationally and internationally just don't work, right? Like they worked for a while when we actually weren't recycling and we were shipping all of our recycling and our waste off to other countries, and it felt like it was economically viable, but we actually weren't doing our earth any justice. So, I guess some of the power lies at the state. And do you see, you might know, even having not been appointed yet or actually serving on the commission yet, you might know in your respective roles and with your experience outside of that, whether you think or whether the commission actually could serve as an advocacy arm of the city when it comes to, say, improving our recycling laws at the state level, making it more viable for companies that could do, sort of zero waste, well, not zero waste, but those that might do hard to recycle companies that could take those items, whether it's a glass recycling venture or an electronics recycling venture, and have it actually be local using the brain power of our universities. So I guess one question is about advocacy. The other is about, do you see there being a role for starting to, attract those businesses or grow that industry, or kind of going a little bit outside of just the, litter pickup and events that traditionally the commission is focused on?
I think I don't have a whole lot of experience in prior advocacy work with the CPC, but I know that there is definitely room to do so. I think we can gather a lot of evidence in the work that has been done with the nonprofits that are a part of it, and that data can go towards advocacy for the future. The biggest that I've seen with myself is through funding with the CPC, we've been able to apply discounts to people that come through to the neighborhood electronic collections. And when we do so, that incentive really increases people's accessibility to recycling, and especially with those hard to recycle materials. And we have people that come through that often don't even need to pay anything because of what the discount covers. And I think that can be evidence in itself of the economic incentive being not so much of an issue. And I think that can go towards the idea of like the companies themselves being able to cover the disposal of items. And that's something that we've talked about with our vendor as well, and I've spoken a bit with them about that, and I think it's an exciting idea.
And you don't all have to answer. If anyone has thoughts, I just would be interested.
Yeah, I also agree that advocacy is a huge, important part. A lot of as you mentioned, the state laws on recycling are what dictates how we do things. Pennsylvania Resources Council has a history of, and to this day still advocates for changes in the recycling laws. Act 101, for example, which governs and legislates the laws of recycling in our state, is literally as old as I am. It was put on the books in 1988, and I've changed and grown a lot as a person since I was born, but this law really hasn't. And our society has changed a lot. Consumer habits have changed a lot. And so we do need updates to those laws. A year or two ago, PRC released a white paper on the changes we would like to see in that. And to this day, we maintain an active role in the Professional Recyclers of Pennsylvania group that exists in our Commonwealth. And we continue to advocate for changes as an organization, and we bring that to the commission. And I think there is more room for us to grow as a commission to work on that role and to work on that advocacy. And hopefully Larson and I can continue to bring that to the commission.
I just see especially our universities as such untapped resources for, whether it's a grad or an undergrad group project that studies a certain aspect of how one might make one sort of type of hard to recycle item, economically viable or something. So, because if we can just flip it on its head and turn our waste into a sought after item, that then helps us with the closed loop, cycle. So, really, really reducing waste, but we're so far from that I think, it's going to take a lot of just like groups like the Clean Pittsburgh Commission, interdisciplinary work to make that happen. So, anything that you were hoping to address today or cover today that neither council member present has asked you? Okay. Any closing thoughts? If not, I want to personally thank you for your service. Thank you for your time and energy and commitment to the Clean Pittsburgh Commission. And you can look forward to a council vote on your appointment forthcoming. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay, or you're welcome to leave as we move on to the next appointee. Thanks. All right, we will now move on to Rachel O'Neill, who is being reappointed as a member of the Planning Commission with a term to expire January 1st, 2030. Thank you for joining us today remotely. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you. We have information, we have your resume in front of us, if you'd like to give us a brief introduction.
Sure. So my name is Rachel O'Neill. I have been a member of the Planning Commission for about 5 years. I'm currently a real estate attorney at Reed Smith. And prior to my role here, I worked for the city of Pittsburgh in the law department, representing city planning, planning commission, and the zoning board. And prior to that, I worked in both the Department of Finance and the Department of City Planning. So my focus in my practice is on real estate development and zoning, and that is really my role at the commission, is to provide expertise in those areas. The commission does require one member to be an attorney under the city code, and so I currently fulfill that role. I've enjoyed my time on commission so far, and I look forward to serving the city further in that role.
Thank you. And for your awareness, today we are joined by representing council right now as me and council member Barb Warwick, and we're just joined by council member Bob Sharland. So I will turn it over to my colleagues for their questions. Councilmember Warwick.
Thank you. Thank you for volunteering to re-up your your tenure on the commission. Obviously, there's been a lot going on around city planning, a lot of sudden focus on the what the commission does. So, in light of that, to the extent that you feel comfortable, or that you're able. I'd just be curious about any thoughts that you have on ways that, since it is what we've been talking about as well at council and what's being discussed in the public, ways that the zoning can be used to help not just Pittsburgh but cities across the country figure out how to get people off the street. Pittsburgh has people sleeping on the street in many places, and it seems like an incredibly difficult problem. And, you know, shelter beds are one thing, right? Like a cot in a gym is one thing, but it's not, it's not really a viable solution, especially for people who have, you know, have all their belongings and have all their things. And so they're resorting to sleeping in tents, right? And for months and months and months on end. So at any rate, if you have any thoughts on that, I would love your expertise.
Sure. So yeah, zoning can be one tool in the toolkit to help with the housing crisis and providing safe places for people to stay. I think the first rule of zoning for me is always do no harm. You know, traditionally zoning has been more restrictive in the past, and a lot of what the Planning Commission and ultimately our recommendations to council is to remove those existing restrictions and those existing hurdles to any sort of, you know, increased housing stock, providing places for people to live and stay in the long term. And so relying on city staff, they've been trying to reduce those barriers and make it much easier for people to have, you know, denser housing, denser development, that, you know, the low-hanging fruit, making sure that there's more housing stock available. And then in the most recent discussions with council and some of the newer initiatives, trying to address the people living on the street, trying to find places for unhomed people. Traditionally, that's been a little bit outside of the zoning arena, just because we're regulating buildings and, you know, how buildings look for the most part. But I think that there are some options to make available more spaces through this arena. But I think first and foremost, it's preventing any sort of barrier to that through zoning. We want to make sure that we're eliminating any sort of, you know, unnecessary hurdle that prevents people from finding housing stock.
Okay, great. And sort of what are your thoughts? Because I understand too, and again, this is sort of the topic at hand. When it comes to zoning, you know, people they don't want to just see something pop up that they had no idea was going to be there. But at the same time, you know, as the Planning Commission, we need to plan for the needs of the whole city, right? And make sure that the whole city is bearing the burden equally of accommodating the needs of the city. So again, back to this issue of having unhoused people that we need to get into housing. Do you have any thoughts? So I understand about building buildings, but also about the use of buildings. If you have any thoughts, again, as it would apply to cities nationwide. I understand that you may not be able to speak to specifics.
No, I think it's really interesting. It's a balancing. We want everybody to be aware of what is going on in their neighborhood, and to the extent possible, you know, have some public process around that, while balancing the need for, you know, getting people in homes quickly and for long-term solutions. So that's kind of what we're trying to balance here. It is interesting in cities of a certain size. I'll tell you that I practice in other jurisdictions, and, you know, especially in Pennsylvania. And when you have, you know, one or two developments or one or two projects in your smaller city, it's easy for people to keep up with what's going on. Pittsburgh obviously has a lot of development, a lot of uses, a lot of different neighborhoods. And so making sure that people are aware of what's going on can be difficult. You know, we try and make sure that we're putting out all of we certainly put out all the public notices required. You know, city planning staff uses the Engage page. I frankly haven't spoken to Move about this, but I think the Engage page could be a little clearer. I think that's something that we as a city can work on, is, you know, making sure people are aware of what is changing and the impact of that. And just being a little easier to search and find that way. But we do want to make sure that any policies we are adopting are, you know, focusing citywide. We don't want one neighborhood bearing the burden of certain uses and, you know, protecting other neighborhoods from certain uses. It really is something that we need to be thinking about citywide, and, you know, with the input of the city, while also not, you know, making the regulatory process so burdensome that it prevents people from finding homes and other solutions.
Great, thanks. And then also, since you mentioned about how in the past the zoning code has kind of been used to, exclude people, right? Redlining and all this type of thing. Single family homes over here, and you can have apartment buildings over there, and that has been used to sort of segregate the city. What are ways that we can not just neutralize that, right? Like not just say, okay, you can build anything anywhere, but actually use the zoning code to actively repair and desegregate the city to ensure that, if I do a development over here, that there will be access for, a development in a desirable neighborhood, I'll say like Squirrel Hill, for example, that's my district, right? By a fantastic high school and great amenities and all that things, that any development that goes up there will also be accessible to not just, people who make, six-figure salaries, but also people who, maybe, make less than that, right? Like whether that's, 50K or lower, or, I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think there are several tools that help incentivize increased density and more affordable housing that we're working on now and that have been working nationwide. Certainly the affordable housing requirements that are being proposed citywide requires developments of a certain size to include affordable housing, permitting districts throughout the city to have more density or accessory dwelling units. If you have an existing home and are able to build an apartment or something on the same lot without a lot of red tape and a lot of process, that allows for lower cost apartments or living areas for people in those districts and any district, frankly. But I think the other tools that we have are to incentivize areas, so to provide developers with, incentives to provide more affordable housing or more dense affordable housing, to provide, property owners and developers incentives to include those amenities near or in their developments so that we're not having, a big affordable housing development in an island. We want to have fresh food, we want access to transit. So kind of trying to incentivize those aspects. And zoning can't work alone. I think there are other incentives. We're having worked in finance, there could be some incentives to allow people to stay in their homes longer without additional cost or, tips or other, tax incentives that could go along with those developments that help incentivize people to stay in their homes, to, longer be able to afford that, to incentivize developers to include more affordable units, to provide more amenities, making sure that people have access to all of the great things in our city throughout the city. So, like you said, talking about your district, making sure that people have either access directly to schools that they can walk to, or being near transit that they can easily get to great schools, and all those other amenities, parks, grocery stores, everything else.
And do we have now, I'm curious, do we have now do we offer incentives currently to, and I'm not talking about LRTAs and that kind of thing, but like to market rate developers, do we offer incentives now to include, if they include affordable units or take vouchers or whatever it is?
Right now in certain districts, as currently written in certain districts, including the newer districts proposed and adopted by the mayor and adopted by council. So the urban UCMU, residential mixed use, certain new districts that have been rezoned, they allow for incentives, so increased density, building taller, building wider. If there is a fresh fruit grocery store, if there are a certain number of affordable units at certain standards of AMI, those do exist and those have been successful throughout the city. And so I think increasing that program providing those incentives citywide would allow for, increased density throughout the city, not just these specific districts that have been rezoned.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, so just sort of citywide, there is not currently, so let's say, I know Councilman Charlin is here, so, there's a new building that just went up on the south side, or maybe is almost done, it's on the river. It's beautiful building, right? And any number of new buildings. Is there currently an incentive for market rate developers to include affordability in, not requirement? I mean, like voluntarily include affordability into their projects where they get something?
I'm thinking about the south side, and I don't believe in those districts. There currently are. It may be if it was in the Riv, there may be, but there certainly are areas in the city where new development could be built, and there are not those incentives to include affordable housing.
Okay, I think that's all. Maybe I'll think of something else when the other members ask their questions, but thank you, that was helpful.
Happy to chat offline anytime too.
Thank you, Councilperson Charlin.
Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner O'Neill, for your continuing service on the Planning Commission. I very much respect that you are one of the individuals on the Planning Commission that are more the building professional, someone with a background in working in building that I think is really important, and I would like to see the Planning Commission move towards having more individuals like you that have that kind of background, that work through developments and work through zoning codes and know what this means in real practical terms when you have to litigate these cases. So I'm very thankful for your continued service here. I do have a handful of questions, not so much about your resume or your experience, but kind of as the Planning Commission as a whole, and where you would like to see it go, and also where I would like to see it go. But I want to start off with, you mentioned the Planning Commission is getting a lot of attention now. It seems like the Planning Commission gets a lot of attention when things are contentious in front of it. One of the things that scares me is that the Planning Commission does not get enough attention when things are not going in front of it. And I am terrified that when I look through Planning Commission agendas, very rarely are we seeing projects coming in front of the Planning Commission anymore. More often we're seeing changes to neighborhood plans, things like that. And I'm curious from your perspective, what can we do so that we are starting to build in Pittsburgh again and we can compete with our peer cities, and just the lack of construction that's happening here in Pittsburgh? I think I can count the number of cranes operating in Pittsburgh right now on one hand, and that's one hand if I'm losing a couple fingers. So what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So Pittsburgh is a unique city in Pennsylvania. Like Philadelphia, we have a different regulatory scheme than most of the state. Certainly it's a little bit new to developers from outside of the city. And some of the processes are new to developers outside of the city. So there is a little bit of a learning curve. So I think what we're trying to do at city planning is streamline some of the code and some of the process, so there's less of a pause or appearing to be a hurdle when you are coming to the city. Most people are doing their economic analysis when they're developing in the city, seeing what, they can make viable. Some of these incentives that we talked about earlier really help to, make people want to come here. I think that's a big mover and shaker, is including some of those incentives, looking at cities of similar size or in kind of the geographic area, and making the city competitive in that way, in terms of zoning and then potentially other economic incentives or other arenas. As far as what's coming in front of the Planning Commission, a little bit of a double-edged sword there. We don't want to make people go through too many hoops. We want to make sure that the public is aware of what is going on and has an opportunity to participate in the public process. Sometimes things come to Planning Commission and there aren't a lot of comments, there aren't a lot of community concerns. So for projects like that, we'd certainly like to see maybe a reduced Planning Commission schedule, something we've talked about, something we're exploring. Still having public hearings, but on those projects that, only require a little bit of input from the commission and are otherwise signed off on by the community. We'd like to lessen that process. So it is something we're looking at, making sure that, we're not taking up too much time. Like you said, working with developers, we're always looking at our schedules and, where we can cut some time or where we're worried about time being extended. And anywhere we're looking at public process, not just the city of Pittsburgh. But so to the extent we can make that process very clear and, reduce the time frame while also providing the public with an opportunity, that's something we're really interested in, and hopefully we'll get back to you all with sometime soon.
I'm really glad to hear that you're looking at reducing the time frame. As I talk to national developers, we love to demonize the local developers, but when we talk to the developers that work nationally, one of the things that I hear consistently from them is that it takes so much longer to build in Pittsburgh than it does in Milwaukee, where housing prices are going down, or Cincinnati, Columbus. Charlotte is a very different situation, but all of those other places, how much longer it takes from Pittsburgh. And then the other thing that's even worse is not just that it takes so long, but there's so many variables. It might take 6 months, or it might take 18 months to get through the process in Pittsburgh. And an out-of-town developer cannot make that happen. And therefore, we are not building units in our city on that basis. And that terrifies me when we see the number of projects that are not being built here, and we see our affordability go down and down and down. So I am excited to see an interest in creating some form of an expedited process, or if not that, just some form of a more regular process that the developer can count on.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Okay, well, I also wanted to ask, on the Planning Commission, because the Planning Commission has such an important role in the future of the city. In some ways, it's more important than anything that we do at this table. I am curious, is the Planning Commission, we see you in the meetings, but does the Planning Commission do forms of like continuing education or retreats, meeting offline, some sort of like understanding what building trends are, or anything like that?
So for the commission as a whole, in the time I've been on it, there have been kind of some trainings. I know I've been to a historic review training because we interact with them a little bit. And we certainly get regular updates from city planning, and, to the extent we have any questions about trends, they're really great about giving us updates about certain projects, certain trends, certain ideas. They're the geniuses that are in the weeds all day. As a commission, no, there isn't some sort of formal training process. Certainly all of us are in different arenas in terms of career. So, I'm responsible for my continuing education, and I know everybody else does that as well, architects on the commission, and then there's certainly continued community engagement with members who are serving in those community development and community liaison roles. I wouldn't mind more, certainly open to it. People tell me their thoughts all the time, and I try and keep abreast of it. But I think something more formal is something we could explore.
I think that's something I would really like to see is, again, not so much you live and breathe this every day, whether you're in the planning commission or not, with your professional experience. But I would like to see the planning commission have more building construction. I'm not sure if it's continuing education, but some sort of like professional development, I guess, is kind of what I'm saying. And I don't mean to say that in like a, I don't know, a paternal way, but I would like to see folks that may have got there in a different avenue than yours and your experience, having a better understanding of where things are going, especially as the world is changing. The building environment is changing nationwide right now, and Pittsburgh is not keeping up with our peer cities. So I appreciate your willingness to that, and that's something I would really like to push for. The other question I had for you is, you mentioned some of the things that are coming before you soon here. I'm curious what your thoughts are. We have a zoning code, and I think it's very important to acknowledge every time we talk about the zoning code. The zoning code's basis, the zoning code was created with the most vile, racist intentions. That we are still working
Yeah,
through.
and just to be clear, that zoning code's nationwide.
Right, exactly.
Not unique to Pittsburgh.
Right, exactly. But we are still trying to solve some of the problems that are still baked in there. But with that said, I'm always interested in the idea of citywide blanket policies. And as we talk about these citywide blanket policies, how that might impact, our residents. There's the Strip District, where at one point, I think it was slightly pre-pandemic, it was one of the hottest neighborhoods in the state to build in. And then I've got neighborhoods where I can't get a building permit or a roof permit pulled, that no one is investing, a cent into the neighborhood. And we're looking at blanket policies to describe building everywhere for the entire city. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on those citywide overlay zoning policies. Does that make sense in 2024?
Right. So I think it depends on the specific citywide policy. The one most commonly heard of is the inclusionary zoning, affordable housing, or increased density citywide. That's what we're seeing in some other jurisdictions, fewer limits on the number of dwelling units on a property. And it's something I struggle with a little bit, learning about. Certainly, I think it is fairer to have, in those two terms, kind of citywide policies, making sure that we're, not protecting any one district and allowing density throughout. We also don't want to make it too easy. I don't want to say too easy. We don't want vulnerable neighborhoods to be overcrowded with uses that maybe are less desirable, and kind of backpedaling, overdoing it. So I think it's really a case-by-case basis in terms of what we're trying to target, and something we need to, look into with each concern. I think personally, I'm generally in favor of, citywide policies, but there are certain times where it's not appropriate. We have certain zones and zoning districts for commercial development. We don't necessarily want those spilling over into residential districts. We want to be clear that we're not putting a sewage treatment plant next to a single family home, and making sure that we have some of those buffers there that protect both uses. We want to make sure that we're fostering industrial uses, commercial uses, and residential uses. And, it doesn't help the sewage treatment plant to be surrounded by homes, and it certainly doesn't help those homes. So it's kind of working through that issue. We want to be as fair as possible, and I think for the most part, citywide policies help with that fairness and overcoming some of those past discriminatory policies. But there is a little bit of protectionism that we want to see, just making sure that every use can be viable and, contributing to the city.
Thank you. And because you kind of invoked it there, what policies do you believe would increase affordability?
Sure. So I think policies that make it easier for both developers and even individuals to increase density. So right now we have a lot of single-family districts, and we're proposing to allow accessory dwelling units in almost all of them, provided those dwelling units otherwise comply with the code. In terms of kind of height, setbacks, things like that. If it's easy for me to put a mother-in-law in my apartment in my home, I don't have to separately pay for, somebody to come live with me, or maybe I can, supplement my mortgage by putting in just accessory dwelling units. Similarly, if we're looking at certain residential neighborhoods, if we're able to put, duplexes on lots that were previously restricted to single-family homes, we can get a lot more housing stock, typically being able to be built at a lower cost. It lessens the barrier to entry, letting individuals kind of do that instead of only, large-scale developers. So really things that, allow for more density and, also support public transit. I think that's a really big component too. Certain districts, maybe you don't have grocery stores right nearby, and that's not where you're expecting density. But if you have great public transit, you can get to a grocery store, your library, a park very quickly. That is also very helpful. So to the extent we can incentivize that and, developments near bus stops, BRT stops in the future, I think that also helps.
I asked a very subjective question. I think you gave a very objective truth that is academically studied, and I want to say that is the right answer.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Thank you.
Great. I very much appreciate hearing that that's a mindset of at least one of the commissioners on the Planning Commission. So thank you for that. I've got a lot more. I could talk about this all day, but I really appreciate your time, and I will pass it on to the next council member.
Thank you,
And like I
Councilmember.
said, with Councilwoman Warwick, happy to connect offline and talk through some of these things.
Thank you. Councilwoman Kale Smith, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair, for hosting. Good morning. I've actually just got to see you in action for the first time really this past week, or past 2 weeks, I should say, during the hearing and some of the legislation that I put forward, and during Sean Carter and Solicitor Friedson's presentation. And you made some comments then during the hearing and after their presentation. And would you want to elaborate a little bit on those comments? You mentioned about the Fair Housing Act. Did you and I mentioned, everybody was pitching this as the current zoning laws presented by the administration to city planning that you voted in support of, including inclusionary zoning and some other things, I believe, that you gave positive recommendation to the city. And so my concern is that if we continue to hear how inclusionary zoning is illegal and unconstitutional, yet our planning commission voted to recommend it to council. And for me, that's concerning. And the other part was, in terms of the fair housing laws, you mentioned that even if we weren't out of compliance, that it wouldn't hurt us to go further and to do more. And I'm wondering what your knowledge is of what City Council has done to strengthen those laws over the years. And we did not worry about whether or not we were, whether we just met the requirements. We went above and beyond. So I'm curious what your knowledge is on those two subjects, and if you have any comments that you'd like to make or clarify at this time.
Sure. So I think that my statements at the Planning Commission regarding the Fair Housing Act were fairly straightforward. I'll respectfully disagree that inclusionary zoning is unconstitutional or unlawful. That's something we hear a lot as a talking point, but for the most part, courts have upheld it as a lawful restriction similar to other zoning. We want to make sure that the city is not running afoul of any sort of federal law that could make it susceptible to lawsuits, any sort of punishment by the federal government. As far as, and I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought.
Yeah, no, I asked a lot there one time. I apologize.
Yeah. So, City Council has always been very supportive of making sure that, the zoning code updates are, making it easier for people to find housing and being supportive of, increased housing in the city, and also protecting, the interests of all of our citizens. There's no doubt about that. And, we're the ones recommending the laws. You all are the ones that are voting on it. So, we certainly appreciate your wisdom, and you also hear a lot more than we do. You came to our Planning Commission meeting most recently, and I think I commented to some of the lovely citizens who were there that this is probably the biggest audience we've had. Normally we see a handful of people, and in our interim room we didn't have a standing room. We had people filled to the brim in the hallways. So you all see a different side of that, which is very important. I'm here from a more academic standpoint, and I'm here to listen to the people that come before us. But like I said, you all have more reach with that. So I'm there to make sure that, we're compliant with federal law, advising on potential risks, and advising on, national trends to the extent we can make the city competitive and beneficial for everybody here.
So I would thank you for your comments. I do want to say that I hope that you realize how important this issue is to the residents of the city of Pittsburgh. In 4 days, we had, I believe there was 260 people online on the Zoom. The phone lines crashed. Couldn't get through. People could not get through. There were about 200-300 people in the hallway, and there were hundreds of people turned away downstairs. And that's in 4 days. So that was across the city at 2:00 in the afternoon. So it's an issue that people care about. I think they want to have their voices heard. We're going to have another hearing, possibly two. I'm working with Councilwoman Warwick and the administration and others on what that looks like. But I will say I expect a lot more people, because we're going to do, if the city planning does not do a mailing, I will do another one citywide, because the public has a right to know what's going on in their communities and the land next to them. We don't do anything in the city of Pittsburgh. We don't plant a tree without going to a community engagement group or some way to engage the public. But you're going to change the zoning significantly across the city of Pittsburgh without any conversation to the public. And I mean, to me, I think the administration realizes that there needs to be a public process. So I'm grateful for that, because we had a meeting, and they, thanks to Councilwoman Warwick, I'm going to say, I think she made people understand the importance of that part. But I also think there's an importance of having a zoning administrator who's not elected making decisions for the city of Pittsburgh unilaterally. And I just think that there's a lot going on there. So I think you're going to hear a lot more. So buckle up.
I certainly look forward to more public process. There were hearings on this. I think, to your point, the Engage PGH page could be easier to read. There could be more engagement. And while we did follow the required processes and, postings, this is an important issue, and we look forward to more discussion on the point. And just to clarify, I mean, there certainly would be the council hearings. I think we're also contemplating another planning commission meeting. Is that what you're
correct?
Our planning commission meeting.
So we postponed, if you
so we
recall.
Certainly welcome that, and to the extent we can be in a space that welcomes all of those people and is available to people. We don't want phone lines crashing or Zoom crashing for anybody. we want to hear from everybody. These are citywide policies. Everybody's always welcome to participate at planning commission. So we look forward to the continued support to the extent,
And,
city planning staff, we really rely on their expertise and some of their neutrality to, talk through some of these issues. So I do really appreciate all of the city planning staff and the zoning administrator for their expertise in this area.
and I will say that, by the law, you're supposed to do a mailing to the public when you're changing zoning that significantly. And that did not happen. So I hope that city planning will do this mailing. But if not, we'll be able to do it. We'll do it.
Yeah, yes, city planning has complied with the law for the notices, and they will continue to do so.
Well, posting it is not the law. A mailer is the law, and also notifying people within 150 feet of any structure that could be affected by it. So that's a lot of our boroughs who also came up.
And we do want everybody to be notified respectfully. Citywide zoning, as opposed to a map amendment, is a different standard for that mailing. But because this is so important, we do want to make sure that we're going above and beyond in terms of notice.
Just to be clear, I want to make sure you understand that the law is that you have to do the mailing. And if you say anything different than that, that makes me concerned about reappointing you to the commission. If you're not willing to do a mailing to notify the public about what's happening in their communities in the way that's done by, indicated by the law, then I have concerns with that.
Understood, and I'm advising you regarding the law and saying that we need to have a public process. I'm not misrepresenting anything here, and that's not my intent.
So anyway, so I will say that my concern overall is that we have people that are advocating for the public, not special interest groups, not an agenda that's, and I get your, to some extent appointed by the administration, and they want to appoint people who follow and believe in their policies and what they want to do. But in the end, I think we have a responsibility to do what is right by the city of Pittsburgh and right by our residents legally. And so, for me, those are my things. And so people are sending me the law. They're sending me the law so I can tell you exactly what the law was. But I will say, I'm not going to go into that, but what I'm going to say is that this issue is a big issue, and we're going to continue to organize and advocate, and I think I may call a meeting next week of the public to just start, figuring out what our next steps are. But this is not going to go away until we have the public having a voice, and that a zoning administrator is not making the decisions that for the public. But that's it for me.
Yeah, thank you. And
I actually have a few other questions.
We look forward to you all making the decisions. This is
I do want to say I have
council.
I do have a few others that I'll email you the questions that I want answers to in writing. But I also want to know, what, in your mind, what's the biggest challenges that you have in implementing zoning laws, and why, if you have any concerns? Or if you have something that we could address, what would it be?
I think I mentioned earlier, to your point, the more the public is aware of what we're doing, we certainly post the agendas. The Engage PGH page includes the information that we're working on, in addition to any sort of press coverage that is beyond the city. The city's purview, we can't control the press. I think that could always be clearer. The Engage PGH page, I'm not trying to pick on it, but I think that could be clearer as to what is going on within the city, just citywide, a little bit easier to search. So, if people are concerned about zoning that affects either citywide or their specific district, making that a little bit easier. Certainly, you have been excellent with engaging your constituents regarding the pending zoning that affects citywide, to the extent that some of that engagement can be increased between city planning and council. I think that's excellent because you all have the direct access to all of your constituents. You're talking to them every day, so to the extent we can go beyond posting on the website or mailings or physical postings, I think that can only benefit everybody.
And I do want to thank you for your service to the city of Pittsburgh. It's not always easy being in these positions and on these boards and commissions, especially when you have angry council members who are, trying to make sure their constituents' voices are heard too. And I do appreciate the service. For me, I've always wanted us to make sure that we're representing the public and what they want, not telling them what they have to have, but that we're actually their voice, not, demanding that the public follow our agenda, but we're following their agenda. That they're setting the agenda, not us. Thank you.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that we have been joined by Councilwoman Deb Gross. Councilwoman Gross.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. I was able to follow some of the conversation from the back on the monitors. And so thank you, Commissioner O'Neill, for the lengthy amount of time you've already served on the Planning Commission. And I can say that I've absolutely had the pleasure of working with you in both bills that I put forward to the Planning Commission, but also of seeing your work in working with other members of the Commission and really, I think, asking important questions to large developments that were moving forward in my district. And being able to both let the public have its voice and then also following the law, as Councilman Kale-Smith was pointing to, that the Planning Commission follows the city's code. And I've certainly had bills that moved forward with mailings, and I certainly have had bills that we voted on. I don't think there were bills that I sponsored that were text amendments that moved forward without us requiring a mailing, right? Because city council votes to create the city code. And so I'm curious, and maybe I'll ask the clerk's office to research, because I don't think it certainly wasn't in my time when we've written that section of code to say when mailings are required and when they are not, because city council has the power to amend it, right? Just like city council created the Planning Commission. And it is the city council's powers that we have delineated, right? And, or in this case, assigned to Planning Commission to hear some decisions and not others, right? And so in thinking of in those terms, that's true in terms of the process in the code, like I was just talking about, but it's also true that City Council has the final authority in creating the zoning categories and incentivizing kind of like what I think you referred to a little bit earlier, density bonuses or zonings for height, which we've seen recently change, for example, in Oakland to allow more intense development on certain corridors. And I think you touched upon it a little bit earlier in your interview, but I've contended that rather than allow the market to decide what they want to build in Pittsburgh, that it is our responsibility to guide what is best and where is best to be built. Because, for example, we've replaced water systems in some places and not others. We have transit in some places and not others. We have childcare deserts and places where there aren't childcare deserts. That we have food deserts in places where there aren't food deserts. So it makes sense for us, if we're going to incentivize housing, for example, that we not allow it to be incentivized where there really isn't all of the other supports that people need on a daily basis. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to I've said them in other contexts, so I'm saying it now in your interview.
Yeah, and thank you for reiterating and for your comments. I don't disagree. I think that, increasing density throughout the city, benefits everybody, but, we want to make sure that that development is responsible and, near those essential services, grocery stores, parks, things we know are beneficial. And, with increased transit, that certainly expands that area. But, we have a lot of work to do. So I can't say more than I agree.
Okay, that's it. I just wanted to get a chance to kind of respond to some of the other questions I heard in the interview, and I don't want to belabor this any longer. I think that we've had a lot of questions and answers today. So thank you, Madam Chair. That's all.
Thank you, Council Member. I don't have any questions. This has been a very full and exhaustive interview process, so thank you for your time. Thank you for your willingness to serve. I will just say for anyone listening, I do want to distinguish between the Planning Commission and the Department of City Planning. During this process, I've seen a lot of emails coming to us that seem to conflate the two. Department of City Planning, they are professionals who work for the City of Pittsburgh as employees, planning director, zoning administrator, and they can work to help craft legislation that is then introduced by council, sometimes via the mayor. And the Planning Commission, which does not craft legislation, it considers, sometimes considers legislation and sometimes considers other matters that come before the Planning Commission and acts in a quasi-judicial manner, but it does not craft legislation. You don't need to respond to that. I just wanted to say for those who might be listening, thank you again for your willingness to serve, and you can expect a confirmation vote forthcoming.
Great. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you. Having exhausted the business of this pre-agenda interview, this meeting is adjourned. Good morning and welcome to the Standing Committee's meeting for Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024. Meeting and public comment announcements. All meetings will be live streamed on the city's website. And for guest speakers joining us at the table, please do not turn your microphones off. Our first order of business is roll call. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Mr. Sharlin.
Here.
Mr. Coghill. Ms. Gross.
Here.
Mr. Lavelle. Here. Mr. Mosley. Ms. Cal-Smith.
Here.
Ms. Warwick.
Here.
Mr. Wilson. Ms. Strasburger, Chair.
Here.
6 members present.
Thank you. Our next order of business is public comment. I would like to remind all speakers that the rules of council state that comments are limited to matters of concern, official action, or deliberation which are or may be before City Council. Profanity will not be permitted. Please state your name and neighborhood for the record, and you will have 3 minutes to speak. Our first registered speaker is Dr. Ronald Lynn Miller.
Dr. Ronald Lynn Miller, Bell Sur, also Atacama, Chile. Global Intelligence Society candidate for President 2028 and 2024. Global Info Intelligence Network at gmail.com is a primary new contact. I teach a graduate level course in called the Introduction to Global Astronomical Studies. You know, in the early 2000s, I became a member of the American Astronomical Society, and I teach this in the CGSII program of education. A concern of this council is to identify Pittsburgh as a space and astronomy city, proclamation 8 October 2024. Surely a male of black African descent claiming vote legitimacy and leadership of the offices of council and mayor, such as you, Mr. Lavelle, and Mr. Gainey, know Nasrada Center for Space Science and Astronomy, Ilmin Tarari, that's African Hausa, in Nasuka, Nigeria, telephone 234-806-248-3876. And the Pan-African School for Emerging Astronomers, contact PASEA collaboration at gmail.com. The National Astronomical Observatory, Kokoritsu Tenmondai, that's Asian Nihongo of Japan, in Mitaka, Nihon, 81-422-343600. The National Astronomical Observatory of Chile, Observatorio Astronómico de Chile, that's Espanol, in Cerro, Chelon, Chile, 56-2977-1093. Now, you did, Mr. Lavelle, say that there was astronomical and space value to, one, the Allegheny Observatory, but you didn't offer any contact information. So the value to us as citizens was 0. But I will offer something. The contact telephone is 412-321-2400. You offer the value of CMU. But again, no contact information. The McWilliams Center for Cosmology and Astrophysics, Dr. Tiziana De Matteo is the director at 412-268-1888. And the proclamation also implied the value of the University of Pittsburgh, the Department of Physics and Astronomy, 412-624-9000. I use this astronomical journal in the course which I teach, and for those of you who cannot stop talking like Ms. Warwick, you need to really
Thank you very much, Dr. Miller. Thank you very much. Our next registered speaker is Ekahana Halmakina.
Greetings and good day. My title is Ekahana Halmakina. I'm the Grand Inca of the Iroquois Confederacy of Aboriginal American People. I'd like to thank Councilwoman Teresa Kell-Smith for halting the insidious changes to zoning without a hearing from the people of this city. The public process is in place to serve as a reminder of who and why you serve, and the rule of law on the books to do no harm. And also as a reminder to the oath taken to support, protect, and defend the Constitution. It is apparent that the proposed changes do not have the support of the citizens of this city. During a recent interview with Channel 11 News, what didn't get aired was how I explained that prior to moving to Stanton Heights 24 years ago, I too was homeless myself after escaping a domestic situation. So I am no stranger to the struggles that homelessness presents. And I obviously don't equate homelessness with being dangerous. And I personally support this city in its efforts to assist people facing homelessness. In fact, over the past 24 years, I've personally opened my home to family members, to friends, and even a stranger to keep people off the streets. I am currently using my home and resources to help mitigate homelessness by helping a 61-year-old woman who is homeless and staying with me as we speak. My problem with the placement of the shelter in Stanton Heights is, number one, how they went about it. After engaging with the community and hearing our concerns, they moved people in despite pending litigation. Number two, they never explained their vetting process. We don't want pedophiles nestled in between two schools, only yards away from two schools. There are people who feel betrayed by this process and worried about their property value. You have houses worth $100,000 all the way up to $400,000 and beyond, right next to this shelter. When they bought their home, if they would have been informed, when they bought their homes, they weren't thinking about a shelter. And if they knew there was going to be a shelter there, they would have chosen to live somewhere different. Again, we all feel betrayed in one answer. How was this project allowed to move forward? Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. You must put people over profit. All money isn't good money. Look beyond the financial gain and ensure the safety of the people you serve.
Thank you very much. There being no further registered speakers, we will now take comments from those in the audience wishing to speak. Are there any speakers wishing to come to the podium?
Good morning. My name is Stanley Lowe, and I'm from Manchester. I'm focused. Nowhere in the city of Pittsburgh would there ever be a $650 million development proposed in any of the neighborhoods without a community meeting. Nowhere. There would not be a city councilman that would allow that to happen. Once again, we're asking Councilman Dan Lavelle to make sure that the Manchester residents have an open community meeting about the proposed development that's happening right next door to us. You know, Manchester is one of the first neighborhoods to have a neighborhood plan, one of the very first. It's amazing that we have a neighborhood plan, but we don't have an affordable housing plan. It's absolutely amazing that in the last 12 years, there's not been one affordable housing unit built in the community. 2 days ago, 5 neighbors got together, my house, took money out of their pockets, sent over 1,000 letters out to the community, alerting them to what's going on in the neighborhood. We're going to have a community meeting. If we have to go hungry to have a community meeting, we're going to have a community meeting. Our meeting is now scheduled for October 29th. Anybody who wants to come, we invite you to come. We talked to Mayor Ed Gainey. We asked Mayor Gainey to call a community meeting in the neighborhood. He said he can't. He said he won't call a community meeting unless our councilman approves to have a community meeting in the neighborhood. Our councilman said, as of yet, no community meeting is scheduled. There are two meetings coming up with city planning. One next week, I understand, and a proposed vote in November on $650 million development happening in our neighborhood. I'm asking each councilman in their heart, in their sense of fairness, to understand what's about to happen in our neighborhood. We talk about the question of evaporating black residents leaving this city. You cannot have any idea what this may mean to our neighborhood. In all fairness and decency, we're asking you to take a very close look at this development that only proposes 20% affordable housing at 80% of the median income. Translated, what that means is if you make $80,000 and you have a family of 4, you can live there. Which person do you think the developer is going to go for? Not to mention there's no community benefits plan associated with this development happening in our neighborhood whatsoever. More importantly, you would think that the planning department, before any final vote is taken, would call a community meeting, would send out a mailing notice to say, let's have a conversation about this. I can tell you, you can sit there and look at me all you want, but this neighborhood is thoroughly upset about the process by which this is being handled. I shouldn't have to be standing up here saying this. This should be an ongoing process that the neighborhood gets to understand what's going on before it gets slammed in the face with something that may be, let me take that back, that will be detrimental to the community, particularly African Americans that live there.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. My name is Javon F. Brown. I live at 715 Mercer Street. That's the Katie Irvis Tires up on Bedford. I thank you, Stanley, for coming and speaking. The many words that you used is what I should have been able to say, but I get a little bit too excited. You were very professional, and these people need to know how to talk to people professionally. Understand this. I've been coming down all these years. When I talked to Miss Smith, she was saying, and then they talking about, and they go Miss Gross, which Mr. Stanley Lowe, you didn't know this, but Miss Gross, one time I came to the meeting, she says, we're going to have all the police, the chief of police was supposed to go to every neighborhood. And she stood and she said, but me and Mr. Perdue, the mayor decided to put the Hill District with Lawrenceville. So I say to Mr. Lavelle, how did that happen? That means that Lawrenceville, we had to take 2 buses to get to there. If you took it and put it here as city council, each one would have took a bus to get here. Why is it that we, the poor people that don't have cars, because in Lawrenceville, you decide to live there, even though they don't have places to park, but they love their city. And it's like a little city. They have everything that we don't have, but we couldn't even get the police to come up and talk to us, because she made the decision to go to Lawrenceville. And that's when the police took me and went over there and took Dave Fields, that owns the car on 5th Avenue, and came to him, because Harper went to jail. Who you gonna call? Because they used to mess with him, and he would call Harper. Who you gonna call? They even went in there and they tasered this man in his business. Now, you know that's against the law. He's in his business. He's tasing him. He's the elderly too. Man, I say that because I know it personally. I know what happened personally. He's the businessman for this city. His wife has a business next door, but he could be tasered in his business. I want to say this. Okay, they're talking about the president, and I was saying the lesser of two evils would be Kamala. But I think we need to look at this. I believe that Dr. Miller, who is running for president, will be the best of all. He knows the issues and he knows what we need. He has been here in this city of Pittsburgh. He is watching. He knows how you act. I see it. And that's the some of the reason is because of the way Yins treat me. Because Ms. Harris did not post these meetings that you have in the meeting. I think that's you have the meetings before you have our 10 o'clock meeting. Yins may talk till 11 or 12. That's very disrespectful. We want to do all that talking. Let us speak first. We only get 3 minutes. Let us speak first. Then you do all your talking. Maybe we'll sit and wait. But we be sitting in here hours. And we get 3 minutes and you'll talk over me and the other people.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Any further speakers?
Good morning, Special Agent Sunshine. First of all, I just want to return and send any voodoo hexes, curses sent towards me in Jesus' name. 100 million, billion, trillion Googleplex. Because I know y'all do it, so I'm going to keep protecting myself. Here's a prayer. Father, thank you for your goodness and the many blessings you have stored up for me. Thank you that no matter what the circumstances say, I can still stir up my faith and receive all that you have for me. Thank you for your promise that as I honor you and keep you first place, blessings are headed my way, tracking me down and overtaking me. I believe that I cannot outrun the good things you have for me. In Jesus' name, amen. What I want to talk about today has nothing to do with the homelessness situation because everybody's situation is not the same. People are homeless for different reasons. Some people choose to be homeless because there's no peace in the shelters. They choose to live in the street. Some people are evicted for not paying their rent, mortgage, whatever it is. So they're put in the street. Everybody's situation is not the same. But what I want to talk about is what is the same? What makes us the same? That's what I want to talk about today. It doesn't matter what your religion is, whether it's Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, Catholic, whatever it is. It does not matter what your religion is, where you come from, whether you're, again, Muslim, whatever. What makes us the same is the blood that flows through each of us that makes us all the same. If we bled and it was green, that would make it different. But when we bleed, it's the same. It's red. Period. So, knowing that, what keeps us separate is the hatred. Us fighting for this difference. Well, I'm Jewish, I'm British, I'm this, it's the hatred that keeps us separate. And creates the strife so that we don't come together. But God is not playing with us. We have to love each other no matter what color we are, no matter where we come from, no matter what our religion is. Our blood is the same, and that's what makes us the same. In Jesus' name, I just wanted to bring that message. I think that's why he brought me here. The 3-minute act is the Sunshine Act. That gives us 3 minutes to speak. I'm sunshine. So obviously I'm here for a reason, you guys. And homelessness is not it. I have the favor of God on my life. In Jesus' name. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Any further speakers? Seeing no further speakers, we will now move on to our standing committee's agenda. Our first committee is the Finance and Law Committee, and we have supplemental new papers.
Bill 1068, resolution amending Resolution 588 of 2024, which authorized the mayor and the director of the Office of Management and Budget to enter into an agreement or agreements with the County of Allegheny for the completion of lead safety projects as approved in the City of Pittsburgh's American Rescue Plan Act allocation at a cost not to exceed $600,000 by updating the authorized recipient to be the Redevelopment Authority of Allegheny County.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? Councilmember Charland.
Yes, is someone here to talk about this? I'm curious why we're paying Allegheny County for lead line replacements.
I can start, and then we have we should have, let's see, I don't have anyone for this bill, but I can start to explain it. So this is, as you might recall, we allocated $2 million for lead safe projects through the American Rescue Plan funds. A good portion of that was meant to go to activities related to lead inspections through the rental registration program. With that not being able to be stood up and pass court in time for the obligating our ARPA funds, there was a decision with council members who had worked on the lead safe ordinance, along with the Get the Lead Out Coalition, along with those in OMB to, I'm stalling until you get here, to be able to help use dollars, remaining dollars, about $600,000, to help leverage funding to the county for their lead safe work, to then actually get a much larger amount of money for countywide lead safe work. The portion that we are contributing is going to go to inspections and in houses and in apartments within the city. So it'll actually be additive to the city, even though the county's administering the work. And Chief Cornell can get into the details as to why this piece of legislation is needed to clarify a few things, even after the grant has been accepted by the county.
Thank you. Thank you for stalling. Patrick Cornell, Chief Financial Officer. I was running down the hallway with the sound up. So this is really a technical amendment. We've had the conversation before to authorize the spending of these funds with the partnership of Allegheny County. They applied for a HUD lead hazard reduction grant with our match that allowed them to ask for a larger amount from HUD. They were awarded the full $7.75 million request a week or two ago. And in having conversations with the Allegheny County Economic Development Group, we learned that it actually will route through the Redevelopment Authority of Allegheny County. So this is really a technical amendment for a program that City Council has already worked through to approve, thanks to the hard work of the council members who have met with our lead advocates. But this is a technical amendment to update that to make sure it moves in time for the ARPA obligation.
All right. Thank you. Gonna be focused on any ARPA reallocations as they happen here. So wanted to ask the question. Thank you, Madam Chair, for having the explanation here, and thanks, Chief Cornell, for sprinting down the hall.
Always.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of Bill 1068, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Affirmative recommendation. Thank you, Chief. That moves us on to deferred papers, Bill 776.
Bill 776, resolution authorizing and directing the Director of the Department of Finance to limit eligibility for the acquisition of properties through the city's side yard sale program to residents who own and occupy property that directly abuts the vacant lot that is to be disposed.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Discussion?
Thank you. Council members have an amendment on the table. As a reminder, this is the bill about side yards that we've held for a few weeks now, that we were originally intending to restrict to resident homeowners, thinking that it was consistent with council's original intent. We then had some debate about who should or shouldn't be eligible for the program, and we really haven't come to any conclusions. And in fact, it feels like we've raised more questions. I myself was wondering, for example, how many city-owned lots are actually still next door to a resident homeowner citywide, right? I would really like to know kind of how many are where they are. Other members were considering their small landlords and considering that those renters might also be entitled to a side yard. And remember, this is not like a side lot program. The yard, if it were conveyed to the property owner next door, is prohibited from being built upon, right? Is really meant to be like a green side yard. But anyway, and since we didn't have consensus, most members just preferred that we just kind of put a pause on the program until we figure out maybe what is the appropriate program for 2024 and moving forward, and to evaluate kind of what are the merits and maybe what is the best thing for their districts or the neighborhoods that they represent. So that reflects the motion, the amendment by substitution that we have on the table in front of us, which is to suspend indefinitely the current city side yard program until basically council takes future action to decide what it wants. So with that, I'll just motion to amend.
Is there a second?
I'm sorry, motion to amend by substitution.
Second.
Discussion on the amendment. Councilwoman
No,
Kales.
just on the overall bill. I'll wait till the overall bill.
Okay. Discussion on the amendment. All those in favor of amending Bill 776 by substitution, please indicate by saying aye.
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 No.
One no. Discussion on the bill as amended. Councilwoman Kelsman.
Thank you. So I'm actually trying to understand what you're trying to accomplish with the bill totally. Do you mind?
Interrogatory.
Do you mind?
This suspends the side yard program instead of us like putting it on indefinite, like keep putting holds on it. So currently, the side yard program has been operating now for several decades, I think, right? And it allows people who are to buy the lot next door.
Right.
And so you'll remember the very lengthy discussion that we had about 6-7 weeks ago, where there were lots and lots of questions.
I might have been out with COVID. Go ahead.
Oh, I apologize.
Yes.
I'm happy to catch you up on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll abstain today until we talk further. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilperson Charlin.
Yeah, I don't think that we had talked about suspending the program in its entirety. If we did, I apologize. I don't retain that. I would much rather us continue the side lot program as exists while we figure out a more effective way to move this program forward. I am worried about our ability, especially as we, where we are in the calendar, that we'll be able to stand up a new program anytime soon. And I see this as not that we move tons of properties this way, but this is one thing that we do to move properties. And I'm not necessarily comfortable with suspending the program while we figure it out, because I don't know that we'll be able to anytime in the near future here. So I think I'll be voting against this. And I hope other members might join me as well. Didn't realize this was going to be coming today.
We hold it just.
Thank you. Councilman Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. And then I'm appreciative of the conversation I've had with the councilwoman and then also Director Gula. I'm always like looking in the crowd, seeing if don't worry, I'm not gonna have you come up here. At least I'm not going to. But I had a meeting and several conversations after. No, I'm not calling you up to the table. And I actually lost the paper that we had in the meeting. And so I appreciate you sending me that back. And because I just want to read off some of the numbers here that I think are, show that property is moving, and that, I'm not sure this program stopping is really going to stop much, because, I can't remember. I think it's within the past year here, there's been 191 properties moved or sales completed. There's a larger number that you can talk about, but those aren't really sales that have been completed. And so what I thought was eye-opening was that, and what I think we need to get to, is that the land bank has moved 71 of the 191 properties. And I guess public is the city, 77, URA 34, and then there's I guess it would be property reserve 9, which I think actually go through the land bank eventually. But I guess my point of calling out these numbers is that, you know, there's a lot of different entities that move properties, and I'm looking at a couple side yard lots on here that are approved in my district, and quite frankly, they would be a good development. Both parcels would be good for development. And I think we need a much more comprehensive study of all of our parcels that are vacant and abandoned, so we can have a more comprehensive way that we're going to dispose of them. And that's really what I want to get to in this conversation. So, you know, I know that this isn't a perfect way to do it, but I think we could come together and put something that's much more comprehensive, so that in the long term, you know, we're being more thoughtful about how we're disposing of our property. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further?
I'm sorry. I have to make one more note. I always want to plug the land bank, and I think the land bank I think the finance department is doing great, but I just want to plug the land bank here and stand there. I think they're doing a great job with the amount of employees that they have. I think that it just shows how much we can accomplish as we continue to grow the land bank. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilperson Warwick.
Yeah, I mean, I just want, again, interrogatory, just to sort of clarify. So, you know, even if we discontinue the side yard, if you have a lot next to your house that is owned by the city, you could still buy it, correct?
Correct.
Right. So I didn't mean, it doesn't, I just don't want the public to think that this would like get rid of your ability to do that if you wanted to. Okay, that's all. That was all I wanted to.
Any further comment first round? My only question is, have you been coordinating with the finance department on this, and are they supportive? Yes, okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the bill as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor of Bill 776 as amended by substitution, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
No.
Abstain.
1 no, 1 abstention, affirmative recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you.
That moves us on to new papers, Bill 1037.
Bill 1037, resolution providing for the sale of certain property acquired by the City of Pittsburgh at tax sales, items A through T. 2007 DeRodge Street, Council District 6. 2003 Wyandotte Street, Council District 6. 5377 Warble Street, District 9. 5379 Warble Street, District 9. 4937 Rosetta Street, District 9. 557 Lenora Street, District 9. 6824 Kelly Street, District 9. 623 Hale Street, District 9. 621 Hale Street, District 9. 0 Hale Street, District 9. 617 Hale Street, District 9. 242 Johnston Avenue, District 5. 844 Excelsior Street, District 3. 1114 Arlington Avenue, District 3. 125 Millbridge Street, District 3. 212 Attica Street, District 2. 1122 Liverpool Street, District 6, 1234 Butterfield Way, District 1, 17 Pluff Street, District 1, and 1149 Margrave Street, District 5.
We have a motion.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Bill 1037, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Affirmative recommendation, Bill 1038.
Bill 1038, resolution providing for the conveyance by the City of Pittsburgh of certain property having been placed for sale to adjoining property owners in conjunction with the City of Pittsburgh side yard program items A through K. 2804 Webster Avenue, District 6, 3508 Ridgeway Street, District 6, 0 Deary Street, District 9, 902 Laxton Street, District 9, 420 St. Joseph Street, District 3, 1311 Iton Street, District 1, 1313 Iton Street, District 1, 1300 Voskamp Street, District 1, 32 Wosner Avenue, District 1, 3034 Viola Street, District 1, and 0 Orchard Place, District 3.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Bill 1038, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Affirmative recommendation. Bill 1039.
Bill 1039, resolution amending resolution number 237 of 2021 to provide for the extension of a professional services agreement through June 30th, 2026 with Zeo Technologies for costs associated with the provision of web hosting services for the City Controller's Office at a total cost not to exceed $26,250.
Motion to approve. Discussion.
Second.
Second with discussion, Councilman Wilson.
I'm all over the place. I'm not going to comment on this bill, but I'm going to just mention, if I'm allowed to, Chair, I was going to talk about the previous bill for a second. I was just going to mention, I just had a thought that I didn't get out when we were talking about the side yard program, which was that, in planning, we have, bills that talk about, they want to reform zoning, and just, if we're going to reduce the size of the lot that you can build on, then there's another opportunity there to, look at the size of the lots that we should be selling for lower prices, because we could have more lots that could be buildable soon. Thank you.
Thanks. Any discussion on Bill 1039? Councilperson Charlin.
Yes, I do have discussion on this bill. I believe the Controller's Office is here to talk to us about this. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
Douglas Anderson, Deputy Controller.
Andrew DeWitt, Special Projects Manager with the Controller's Office.
Thanks so much for being here. So this is for Open Book,
Yes.
I believe. I do want to ask if we're spending more money on Open Book, and Open Book is down, and has been down for a minute, when we think Open Book will be back up, and
Yes, Open Book has been down intermittently, and we are working with the vendor to get it back up on a permanent basis. Hopefully that'll happen this afternoon.
Is that vendor Zeo Technologies?
Yes.
Are we worried that they're going to be down in the future again?
It's a concern, and after this extension, we are actually going out and we are going out for RFP for, for this contract.
Okay. That Open Book's really valuable for us for a lot of reasons, but would like to make sure that's
Sure,
working
no,
in the
absolutely.
future. So, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Councilwoman Cale Smith, followed by Councilwoman Gross.
Was there an initial RFP for this, do you know?
Yes.
Okay. In the extension, why wouldn't you just issue another RFP? Help me to understand. I just want to make sure I'm comfortable with this vote.
There was an RFP years ago, and it's been extended over the years, and so we just thought we should probably just RFP it again.
So you did
it's been a
RFP
while.
this again?
No, it will be in.
This is an extension.
We are working. This is an extension now, but we are currently working with OMB to have an RFP put out for the services.
Yes, just to clarify, we have also been discussing with INP as far as with their future identification of a new CRM system, that we want this contract extended just to bridge to 2026 so that when we are developing an RFP, it can interface with how the city's CRM system will be working.
I'll be honest, I'm not comfortable extending contracts. I just never have been. Long before this administration, since I've been here, I've just never been comfortable with it. I do hear what you're saying, though, and I'm glad that there was an initial RFP. One other question, separate from this, is, I saw an announcement that the county controller and city controller are going to do some evaluation of the public safety response or some. And I'm wondering, does that include staffing? Because I didn't see any comment about that.
That would, yes, the city portion of that it includes the staffing and response times.
Yeah, of all the departments, not
Yes.
just police, all of them.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Gross.
Okay, I think you've already answered my question. I was going to ask if you, in moving forward, are coordinating with OMB and IMP, and you said yes, right? Because they've got this kind of technology council that puts multiple heads together from multiple departments. So I think it's exactly what you were speaking to, right?
Yes.
So it can be coordinated with the other technology interfaces, basically, and security, which I've heard a lot about recently, and council members have been briefed a bit about how bad actors are hacking municipal systems through, maybe a small software package that one of their affiliate partners has, and then there's not enough firewalls in between, and it can really bring down an entire city's system. So I appreciate that. That was the answer to my question. I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further first round? Second round, Councilman Wilson.
Thanks. Could you remind me what Open Book is?
I'm sorry?
Could you remind me what Open Book is?
Open Book is a transparency portal with all the city's contracts, campaign finance, information, donations to elected officials, and also lobbyist information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember the nice name stuck out to me. I believe this was one of the issues that I believe was just causing some issues with when a contract would expire, and then I believe the spay neuter program maybe was involved, where we kind of missed the mark on renewing that based on like this would actually send the director an update saying that this contract is about to expire.
I don't believe so. Not Open Book. I mean, we could talk about doing that, but it currently does not do that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's up to OMB now whether to tell a director if a contract is expiring.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Bill 1039, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Affirmative recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That moves us
Thank you, Mr.
on
Bean.
to invoices. Do I have a motion for invoices?
So moved.
Motion to approve. I'm sorry, second.
Second. Discussion. I do have one note on invoices, and that is that there are 2 invoices from EMS to ambulance and Chair EMS Inc. that together total over $5,000, but they were for coverage of separate events, so we do not need to waive the rules. Any further discussion on invoices? Seeing none, all those in favor of invoices, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Invoices are approved. That moves us on to P cards. That moves us on to interdepartmental transfers. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor of interdepartmental transfer, discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor of interdepartmental transfers, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
They are approved. That moves us on to P cards. Is there a motion on P cards?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. I do have one note on P cards. We will need to waive the rules because PLI has their quarterly payment for permitting fees to the PA Department of Labor and Industry, which totals $8,572.50, and this payment can only be made currently through their online portal via credit card. So can I have a motion to waive the rules?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Rules have been waived on P cards. All those in favor of P cards as waived, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. That moves us on to Public Works and Infrastructure Committee chaired by Councilperson Warwick.
Bill 1040, resolution authorizing the mayor, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, and the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure to enter into an agreement or agreements with Safe Routes Partnership for the purpose of receiving grant funds from the Ruby Bridges Walk to School grant in the amount not to exceed $1,000 to support the city's Ruby Bridges Walk to School event.
Motion to table. So,
Could we get a second?
Second.
Second, discussion?
yeah, just so this is a a very small amount of money that there's no agreement in place for. Basically, we just checked a box saying that we would, comply with the rules of using the money, and that's it. To do safe walk to school programs.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? And this motion to table request comes from at the request of the administration, correct?
Right,
Yeah.
correct. Right, they just don't need the bill, exactly.
Still requires roll call vote.
Any further
the-
discussion?
Still requires roll call.
Yes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Sharlin?
You want us to vote yes?
Yes to table. Yes to
Yes
table?
to table, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
That's like the upside down world here. Yes.
Mr. Coghill? Ms. Gross?
Yes.
Mr. Lavelle? Mr. Mosley?
Yes.
Mrs. Cal Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Warwick?
Yes.
Mr.
Aye.
Wilson? Ms. Strasburger Chair?
Aye.
Ayes 8, no 0.
Motion to table succeeds. The bill has been tabled. Thank you. That moves us on to Land Use and Economic Development Committee chaired by Councilman Wilson.
Bill 1041, resolution authorizing the mayor and the director of the Department of City Planning to enter into an agreement or agreements between the city of Pittsburgh and Upstream PGH for the installation and maintenance of a community-led public art installation located at 8229 Bryceland Street at no cost to the city.
Motion to approve. Second.
Discussion? Councilperson Warwick.
Just a very quick question, and maybe it does not super important, but Upstream PGH, I mean, I know them as the former 9 Mile Run watershed group. I'm just curious. If no one knows, it's not a big deal. I was just curious.
We have someone here if you'd like to call them up. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Katie Reed. I'm a principal planner with the Department of City Planning and Public History, Art, and Design. So I can speak to that.
Yeah.
What's the question? Just who is Upstream PGH?
Well, it just surprised me that they're involved in a public art project because I know them as 9 Mile Run watershed. So it's just.
So this is related to a stormwater management project, and it's on a piece of land where the stormwater management project is being undertaken. Okay. So the public art is a piece of being done in conjunction with that.
Okay. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilman Mosley.
And this is like near the Homewood East Hills
area?
It's
technically East Hills.
Yeah. Okay. I'm familiar with the project. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Bill 1041, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Affirmative recommendation. Thank you, Katie. That moves us on to 1042.
Bill 1042, resolution approving a conditional use application under the Pittsburgh Code Title 9 zoning, Article 5, Chapter 911, Section 911.04.A72 to Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority, property owner, for a utility general use to construct a new pump station at 7853 Lockway East, parcel 122L50, zoned RIV, IMU, Riverfront, Industrial Mixed Use, 11th and 12th Ward, Council District 7 and 9.
Motion to hold for cablecast public hearing.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor of all those in favor of being held 1042 being held for cablecast public hearing, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Bill will be held. That moves us on to Bill 1048.
Bill 1048, resolution further amending resolution number 797 of 2017, December 28, 2017, as amended, entitled Resolution Adopting and Approving the 2018 Capital Budget and the 2018 Community Development Block Grant Program and the 2018 through 2023 Capital Improvement Program by reducing Children's Museum by $5,000 and increasing Northside Youth Athletic Association by $2,500 and Friendship Circle by $2,500 and authorize subsequent agreements.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Bill 1048, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Affirmative recommendation. That moves us on to Recreation, Youth, and Senior Services Committee, chaired by Councilwoman Cale Smith.
Deferred papers, Bill 846, resolution renaming the Robert E. Williams Shelter located at the Robert E. Williams Park as the Shinley Heights Pavilion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion?
I'll defer to Council President.
Here.
Thank you. This has been a project that's been years in the making, and in order to help the project move forward, we have to officially name what the building is actually going to be. So the former Robert E. Williams Shelter will now be the Shinley Heights Pavilion, and that was voted on by the community.
Any further discussion? Congratulations on this moving ahead. I know it's been years in the making. All those in favor of Bill 846, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Affirmative recommendation. That moves us on to Innovation, Performance, Asset Management, and Technology Committee, chaired by Councilwoman Gross.
Bill 1031, resolution amending Resolution 912 of 2023, authorizing the mayor and the director of the Department of Innovation and Performance on behalf of the city of Pittsburgh to enter into an agreement or agreements or amendments thereto with ESRI, granting uncapped citywide access to ESRI's products, including ArcGIS Velocity for all departments. This will allow the city to build and maintain an authoritative system of record. Expanding access to this system of record will enable the city to make data-driven decisions, share information across departments, and perform advanced analytics. It will also share information with the public, meeting the needs of the city of Pittsburgh by increasing the approved amount by $800,625 for an amended total cost not to exceed $1,950,625 over 7 years.
Was that it? Sorry, couldn't. Motion to approve. Discussion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second with discussion, Councilwoman Gross.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to bring up, I see the director is in the room. Director, would you mind joining us? Appreciate it. Most members have heard me be enthusiastic about all kinds of data mapping in the past, and this, we've heard a little bit about this, I think, in some companion pieces that have moved forward at the city, but I just wanted to give the director a chance to tell you kind of like what will it mean? I'm sure there will be questions about like the process by which we have this bill in front of us and the dollar amount, but also kind of the larger vision, I think, because I think this is really going to help us in policy making, right? Not unrelated to some of the bills we've already seen on today's agenda, to be able to have this power of data that's clean data and that is mappable. So, Director, introduce yourselves for us. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Heidi Norman, Director of the Department of Innovation and Performance. Good to see all of you. It's a little bit of alphabet soup. For the public, let me be clear. ArcGIS and GIS Velocity is our geographic or geospatial information systems. So, in other words, our maps. Almost everything we do in government is based on maps, where things are happening, whether that's in which council district is it in, or which public works district, or which police zone are certain things happening. And the reason that it's needed as the basis for so many of our other systems and the information that we produce is because we need to know specifically where certain things are happening. A slight little bit of history. Until 2020, we did not have this foundational system underlying all of our computer systems and our data systems. What that meant is we had to recreate the addresses in every single system, and they weren't always correct because they didn't always match. In 2020, we brought the GIS system through Esri, which is a company that supplies this foundational system for us, and we made sure that it was available for all of those systems, data systems which it supports. Moving forward from 2020, more and more staff members in all departments are using that particular system to get a better handle and understanding where their services are being utilized and where they need to focus their resources. After interviewing many of the staff members in departments across the city over this past year, our department learned that even more people within government need access to this system. The team did some research and discovered that if we simply extended the number of licenses that were being requested, that would cost far more money than if we extended our enterprise agreement. So essentially buying in bulk rather than buying individual licenses. And so what we are proposing here is to extend this current agreement for this system for another 3 years. You can see for years 5, 6, and 7, the amount of money that it will cost to extend this agreement, the enterprise agreement, so that anyone within the city of Pittsburgh who has need of accessing our geospatial geographic information systems is able to do so.
Great. I can tell you recently, like in my office, we went back and forth with constituents who were being faced with replacing their own sewer lines. Right? PWSA saying, your sewer's broken, you need to replace it. And I literally had to draw a map by hand. I went back through 10 years of kind of infrastructure breaks all around this block, above and below the block, the sinkholes, the water main breaks, the sewer breaks, all around, and was able to persuade, I think, the bureaucracies to the benefit of the constituents that it was their own infrastructure that had subsided, that was causing like the break between the constituents' lateral and the sewer line, which had basically sunk, right? And it worked out well, I think, and to certainly, you know, we got to a better understanding of what was happening with the infrastructure. But imagine that I didn't have to have done that. Imagine that like 10 years of records and 311s and construction permits. So we're using like the, whatever the one is that shows like, you know, Domi repaired something or PWC repaired something, gas line repairs, right? So we pulled from like the permit maps and we pulled from our own bad customer, no customer relationship software that council members have access to, none, right? So our own internal spreadsheets and files and emails, and then layered over, you know, more input from the constituents and photos and things like that in order to make our own hodgepodge map. And imagine that was more just automated in the system and self-evident and had access not through a legislative office, but actually in the administrative offices themselves. So that's the future I'm envisioning. And when we talk about what is the best policy for city vacant properties and who are they next door to, or what zoning codes might they be in that might be the areas where we're trying to build more housing instead of building less housing, we would be able to do this. And up till now, we have not, right? Not even just as policymakers, but no one has that map. And we should. It should be, I think, a robust public debate so that everybody can see the information that we're having. So I'm enthusiastic about this work, and I appreciate IMP's leading this change. Thank you. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion on Bill 1031? I want to thank you for the length and the specificity of the title. All the information is right there in the title, and I appreciate that. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Bill 1031, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Affirmative recommendation. Thank you. Bill 1032.
Bill 1032, resolution authorizing the mayor and the director of the Department of Innovation and Performance on behalf of the city of Pittsburgh to enter into an agreement or agreements and amendments thereto with information technology services for AV installation services with cable management for citywide conference rooms with recommended equipment for a total cost not to exceed $68,455 over 1 year.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing Councilperson Charlin.
Very briefly, how many rooms is this amount going to get us?
I'm going to call Senior Manager Zoe Burns of our service desk to give you specifics.
Okay. I asked because I went through this in my office I thought it was really important for in 2024 to get conference so that my chief of staff and I can be on calls together and not have that weird, like, no, you mute, I mute kind of thing. And it was crazy expensive to do that. We're really just looking for like a monitor and a webcam.
Right.
So,
and this goes even further. So, for example, the police roll call rooms do not have the ability to bring others in remotely. This way, once this is all rolled out, the chief will be able to address all roll call rooms simultaneously instead of driving to each one separately to deliver potentially the same message.
So Zoe Burns, I'm the Senior Manager of the Service Desk in the Innovation and Performance Department. This is for 30 conference rooms, and we have the equipment already. This is just for the installation of that equipment.
30 conference rooms.
Yes.
It's a lot of conference rooms.
It is, yes.
All right.
We're a big city.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I think this is something that we're going to see more and more of, that all of us are going to ask for more and more of. So
yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Bill 1032, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Affirmative recommendation. Thank you very much. Bill 1033.
Bill 1033, Resolution amending Resolution 378 of 2022, authorizing the mayor and the director of the Department of Innovation and Performance on behalf of the city of Pittsburgh to enter into a Fifth Amendment Cooperation and Project Agreement for the creation and operation of the Regional Data Center Agreement with Allegheny County and the University of Pittsburgh, with the city and county providing funding for the university's work for the Western Pennsylvania Regional Data Center by increasing the approved amount by $300,000 for an amended total cost not to exceed $765,000 over 9 years.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Bill 1033, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Affirmative recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
I'm going to abstain from this. Just I have a question.
One abstention. Thank you. So noted. That moves us on to Intergovernmental and Educational Affairs Committee, chaired by Councilman Mosley.
Bill 1034, Resolution adopting plan revision to the City of Pittsburgh's official sewage facilities plan for 707 Grant Street at no cost to the city.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Bill 1034, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Affirmative recommendation. Bill 1035.
Bill 1035, Resolution authorizing the mayor and the director of the Office of Management and Budget to enter into an agreement or agreements with the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership for professional services relating to the deployment and management of mobile restrooms at various locations throughout the municipality, cost not to exceed $600,000 over 2 years.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion.
Discussion, Councilwoman Cale Smith.
Is there somebody here to talk about this? This must be your favorite day of all your work days. You get to come talk to us so much.
I enjoy it. Patrick Cornell, Chief Financial Officer. So this is another one of those bills that Councilperson Charlin referenced earlier. As we are finishing up some of our ARPA allocations, City Council has approved in the allocation plan $600,000 of American Rescue Plan money to be used for mobile restrooms throughout the city. And this agreement, this bill is for an agreement with the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership, which would actually allow us to tap into partnering with them to use those funds and spend those funds. So we have worked with Jeremy Waldrop and the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership to come up with an idea and a solution that we believe is going to be a good fit. We had the downtown potty at Gateway, but what this opportunity will allow us to do is to deploy 11 different mobile restrooms throughout the city, some downtown, but also some at trailheads in various places throughout the city. And these new restrooms will be mobile, as the name implies. They will have cleaning schedules. They will have the ability to text to enter or use a card that we, the city, and the Downtown Partnership will have access to give out. And the idea is that there are different levels of service. So some of them that are going to be used, we expect to be used more frequently, could be cleaned several times a day. If there won't be as much use, it could be checked in on a few times a day or even once a day there. So we have worked through this idea, and that is kind of the understanding of what we are hoping to accomplish with this resolution.
And are my colleagues supportive of the downtown part?
We met with Councilman Mosley this week.
Well, I mean,
I'll let him-
the people that represent downtown, Councilman Wilson and Councilman Lavelle, President Lavelle.
I'll let them answer
I didn't know
that
if they
question.
were part of the conversation.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure they're supportive of their part. I'm curious where they're going across the city of Pittsburgh and other locations.
So the proposed list that we have so far, nothing has been said, but there are several downtown, Gateway Center, Mellon Square, some at Allegheny Landing along the Three Rivers Heritage Trail, East Ohio, Allegheny Commons, Color Park, the Coliseum parking lot, East Liberty Presbyterian Church, and then 2nd Avenue, both at the Three Rivers Heritage Trailhead with Eliza Furnace, and then at the 2nd Avenue lot as well. There is one that the PDP is proposing in Millvale on the trail, but that obviously falls outside of our scope of support.
So I'm curious, do they get any funding for this?
There will be fundraising for additional dollars to pay for a portion of the costs as well, yes.
I'm also curious what the cost of actually building some of the restrooms and facilities that we need across the city of Pittsburgh. Now, one of the places I'm going to bring up, and I don't know that they want a portable restroom. I actually think they look really stupid, to be honest with you, but I understand the need. I mean, with everything that's going on. But the Duquesne Incline, there's always a line there. There's no restroom above there. There's no restroom below there. They have porta-johns for something that it takes almost 2 million visitors. And so has that even been part of the conversation, or you just totally ignored District 2 totally?
So I personally was not part of the conversations. I know that the downtown partnership worked with River Life and Friends of the Riverfront as they were discussing, trail access and usage. But, that is certainly something we can
I'm going to be
talk
honest
about.
with you. One of the things I'm starting to really look at and try to do some evaluation of is how the city is working with all these nonprofits, making decisions for our districts, non-elected officials, people that are getting a lot of public dollars. And, I just feel like there needs to make sure that their council is part of these conversations across the city of Pittsburgh when things are occurring. And we're grateful for our community partners. And I think Downtown Partnership does one of the best jobs I've seen with some of these nonprofits. But regardless, I think that there's always seems to be a way that members of council are circumvented through that process. But more importantly, the public's circumvented. And so I'd really like to make sure that I'm going to start looking into it a little bit more, the nonprofit status and what we're doing and who's actually running the city of Pittsburgh. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilman Mosley.
Yeah, thank you for coming today, and thank you for meeting with me and briefing me on this. Can you talk about some of the other cities that are, and I believe the company that's deploying this is Throne?
Sure. So the group that the Downtown Partnership and partners we've been looking at is called Throne. And they have worked through pilots in Los Angeles. Yeah, it's a great name, isn't it? They have worked through pilots and opportunities in Los Angeles and also the city of Fairfax in Virginia. Some of them have been used on the National Mall in DC, but those are the 3 biggest clients that we've seen.
And can you speak to some of the additional features that you may have not mentioned in your earlier remarks?
Sure. So, like I said, these are fully mobile. They have running water. They have heat. They are really enabled with technology to have access in and out. The idea, too, is that, there are ways for the Throne servicers to know if someone has gone in and perhaps hasn't gone out in a timely fashion, and then we can, dispatch help and support and see if there's need there.
And is there a particular time limit that one would use the facility?
So right now we have anticipated operating hours 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And that's just kind of the standard for this opportunity.
Okay, and then Lisa, from the briefing that you provided me, I guess there's a general 10-minute window in which it's expected, for one person to use it. Then after 10 minutes, I guess, is there an alert or something that's going to be sent to the
Correct.
company?
That's when the servicer would be notified and then be able to check in.
Okay. And obviously, I'm sure, you had mentioned, folks, on the trailheads and stuff like that, maybe, getting off their bike, and using it. And obviously, particularly, from a, public health, standpoint, those who, are unhoused or, don't have access, to traditional, laboratory facilities, how will they, presumably these folks, may not have a cell phone to do the text or do the app, how would they, access a card to be able to use the facilities?
That's a good question. My understanding is that we would have the ability to work with community health and safety to deploy physical cards that could be handed out for access into the restrooms.
Okay. That's all my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilperson Warwick.
Yeah, so could you explain that? I guess I don't understand the cards.
Sure. So the most frequently used way to get into the restrooms is to scan a QR code or text for, a remote unlock. Now, if someone doesn't have a phone or a smartphone or is unable to do that, there is, card access in, and we would need to kind of work with community health and safety to be able to access, you would take your, whatever the card is and tap it to unlock the door. These restrooms remain locked unless someone is going in to use them.
Okay, so someone would need to, yeah, I mean, so someone would need to download an app?
From what I understand, it's a text message that doesn't require a full app download.
Okay, so you just send a text, the restroom would unlock, you'd go in, and then it locks.
I mean, I think from there you would.
You physically, then you physically lock it. Okay, that seems a little overly complicated, but that's fine. Are they accessible? Are they handicap accessible? Okay, good, thanks. And yeah, I mean, I will say, just in general, public restrooms, it's, if you go to Europe and other countries, like, there are public restrooms everywhere. It's kind of wild that in cities in America you have to, I mean, I've had with my kids many times where you're like begging to go, or you're like buying a coffee so that you can go and like take your kid into a bathroom, and it's a little degrading for everybody. It's sort of like the way of life in the United States, which is odd. So I'm glad that we're doing this. The card thing seems, I guess I don't really get it. So what if someone just leaves the door open? Does the door automatically close?
I think they would have notification that the door has remained open, and then, someone would service it and close it.
Okay. All right. I mean, that seems a little weird with the card access, but maybe that's one of those things that I'll get used to. And everyone else will too.
We can keep working through it. And I think one of the things, to add to this too is we are working through ideas for more permanent restroom facilities. That's another line in the American Rescue Plan allocation, is working with the parking authority at Mellon Square. So if and when that comes online, then this mobile restroom that is there now, or will be there temporarily, can be deployed elsewhere.
Okay.
So you can kind of
right. And just curious, can this and this isn't one of the kinds of restrooms that can clean itself?
No.
No. Oh, okay. Those are real. I mean, that's the thing, right? It's just like sprays down, and anyway. Okay. Yeah. That's all for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further discussion on bill? Yeah, Councilperson Charlin.
Just very quickly, you mentioned bring a location to Color Park. When that does happen, or when that plan is going to happen, I ask that you remind someone from the administration they need to talk to me.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Bill 1035, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Affirmative recommendation. Thank you. Our final bill, 1036.
Bill 1036, resolution authorizing the dissolution of the Somerset at Frick Park Tax Increment Financing District, Council District Number 5.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? Councilwoman Gross, followed by Councilperson Charlin.
Thank you. I know we have people here from the URA. If they could join us at the table. Appreciate it.
starting early.
This is like next to Brown.
Great. If you could introduce yourselves for the record.
Sure. David Geiger, Director of Government and Strategic Affairs at the URA.
James Reed, Senior Manager of Development Finance at the URA.
Thank you all. And so I'm just going to remind everybody, because when I read it the first time when it was a new paper, I got it backwards. This is to stop a TIF. So, to stop it, not to start it. So I just wanted to make sure, because I leaned over to Councilman Mosley and he was like, no, it's the opposite. This is not a new TIF. It's an ending an old one. So why don't you give us a little bit of background? And it is a little bit in the legislative packet if members of the public want to go and Legistar. But if you could just give us a little background, that would be helpful, I think.
Sure. So the TIF was initially authorized and created in 2013. So by dissolving it at the end of this year, we'll be ending the district 9 years early. We've decided to request this dissolution because we no longer believe that we need the funding to continue to accrue in the account. We do need the increment that has been captured thus far to remain in that account in order to complete the environmental remediation on phase 3 of the site, which is no longer proposed to include housing as it once did. We've been working with Councilwoman Warwick, the administration, and the community on plans to place a solar farm on 15 acres of this roughly 70-acre site, and then dedicate the other 55 acres back to the city as an extension of Frick Park.
Wonderful. So I like the background. So it was created in 2013. And when these districts are created, that means that any new tax revenue that's generated from them does not come to the city. So it gets deferred. Please clarify.
Yeah.
Yes.
There is a portion of the new tax increment that does not come to the city and the other taxing bodies. I'll defer to James as he probably has the exact percentages.
I see that there are some dollar amounts here. Please.
Yeah. Of course, the incremental base, the existing tax revenue that was occurring in 2013 continues to go to each taxing body, including the city. And then you're correct.
So if we collected it in 2012, then we continue to collect it in 2013, 2014. But then when there's new construction, James, what happens?
Yes, so when there's new construction that's completed, and in this case it was residential on a portion of the phase 2 Somerset development. And so what happened after those properties were reassessed and sold is that then they were on the tax roll at that new increased value. And so a portion of that increased value was then channeled into the TIF fund. And
5%?
The split was, for these homes, it was 75% to the TIF account and 25% to the taxing bodies on a pro rata basis.
I was going to say, yeah, so it must be pro rata, right? So the remaining 25% is split according to whatever our millage is.
Yes,
proportionally.
That's correct.
So proportionally, what are we at the city of Pittsburgh? Less than half of the total mills, but more than a third of the total mills, somewhere in between, if I'm just kind of trying not doing the fractions accurately in my head.
Yes, that's right. Roughly speaking, I think you're between 40? A third and probably 45%. So somewhere in that range, in the 30s, I'd imagine.
Close, but not half of the mills, maybe. So what was 25%? In, let's say, last year?
So that 25% last year, and I will get you the exact dollar amount. I do not have that in front of me, but I believe it was...
Oh, I'm sorry. I think it's right here in the 1.8.
So that's going forward. So moving forward, so for next year, we're expecting around 1.8 million in real estate tax revenues in total. And so based on the city's millage rate, we think that's in the neighborhood of $600,000 that would be coming into the city additionally. But to your question about the 25%, I believe that's in the neighborhood of $300,000, but I will get that exact number to you all.
Yeah, there are some numbers here. I'm sorry, like, because I was just trying to read on live TV and figure out which numbers were which. But it seems like before the TIF district, there was like a total of only $122,000 in property tax coming off the site, and so that's a lot different than 1.8.
Yes.
Yes. And so while we only saw roughly 45% of the 25%. For the last 10 years, this is ending the TIF a full 10 years early. Am I doing my
9 years?
9 years
Yes.
early. Excellent. Okay. So we will be seeing our full share of the property tax value now.
Correct.
Okay. So, so good. I just wanted to kind of review that because I get it a lot. I don't know about other parts of the city. It seems like people are always asking what is the TIF, confusing it with what is ALERTA, trying to figure out what it means for the taxing body, especially now that we have the transit-oriented development bills moving forward, aligned with where we suspect Port Authority is going to want basically their own kinds of TIF, which is a TRID, right? And so this is kind of a relevant conversation that I'm having with members of the public. So I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilperson Charlin.
I'm good.
Okay. Any further discussion, Councilman Mosley?
Yeah. Thanks for taking the time to walking me through this last week. Could you talk just a little bit about why it's ending 9 years early? I think it's important for the public because there was supposed to be a phase 3 of housing, which is now being replaced by extension of the park as well as a potential solar farm. So you could kind of talk about, what was supposed to be in phase 3, why it didn't happen, and a little bit more detail about what's replacing it.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say a handful of years ago, after spending time, the URA working with SLDA, the developer in this case, looking at what the cost would be to complete a third phase of housing on the phase 3 site. It was considered to not be feasible due to largely infrastructure costs, and I'll note that the biggest driver of that would have been an additional bridge being built and placed into the city's portfolio, and we all know how expensive our bridges are to build, maintain. So after analyzing it, going over it a few times, it was determined to be infeasible, and so we started to think more about what could this site be, what is the highest and best use for it. And while we determined that the vast majority of the site, which is already kind of accessed informally as an extension of Frick Park, that about 55 acres of the wooded hillsides and a lot of the site should remain and be formally dedicated back to the city as public park. But there's about 15 acres of more flat plateau space that we were thinking you could maybe do something with. And as we continued to think about it, we arrived at the idea of a solar farm concept. We think that this is, a really great idea. It's very in line with what other areas are looking at. Sometimes these are referred to as bright fields, where I think folks are familiar with like an industrial brownfield as a term, but this is a former slag heap site. There's a lot of environmental remediation that will need to take place because of the city's industrial past. We don't think there's a better way to move the city forward than to build on that legacy by incorporating, green energy and sort of leading into the future in that way. So we started talking to the community, I want to say in 2020, and have continued those conversations working with Councilwoman Warwick's office just to make sure folks are comfortable with that. We greatly appreciate the city's $4 million in ARPA funding that we're receiving to help remediate the site. We've paired that with a $2 million EPA brownfield grant that Summer Lee and our senators were instrumental in helping us secure. So we think between those two funding sources and the funding that remains in the TIF account that we've already secured, that'll be enough to do the remediation of the entire roughly 70-acre site and be able to move forward with both of those concepts.
Thank you.
And to add just a little specifics on the development program as it had been circa 2019, the idea was to create in the neighborhood of 220 additional residential units. However, as David noted, we, at that time in cost discovery, our estimates on just the infrastructure needed to, for the bridge and then some of the site preparation work, that was in the neighborhood of $40 million. And, we exhausted a number of funding sources, including trying to obtain federal funding to, kind of move that project forward at that time. We were unsuccessful in that. And so, the parties, the URA and SLDA, basically came together around 2020 and noted that it wasn't feasible to move forward with this project, hence the pivot to the solar farm and completing the remaining extension of Frick Park.
Thank you. Just one quick follow-up, particularly about the solar farm. Where do you expect the energy generated from the solar farm to be used, utilized, deployed?
So we're not quite there yet in the process. Like I said, we have a bid open right now for the site remediation work. That remediation work will take place, over the course of the next couple of years, 2025, 2026, and as that remediation starts to be completed, we'll take a look at potentially developing an RFP for the solar site. And I think in terms of off-takers of that energy, there's been a lot of questions in community meetings as well about this. Can the residents of Swiss Elm Park, directly adjacent to the site, benefit from it directly? We'd like to see concepts like that explored and advanced further. However, community solar is not currently enabled in the state of Pennsylvania. We'd love to see the state legislature take a serious look at community solar programs that would allow for those kinds of concepts. And we're hopeful that in the next couple of years they will, which is why we're not trying to run forward too quickly with the solar concept and determining who would be the off-taker of that energy, hoping that some additional time allows for the state to take action.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilperson Warwick.
Just so if I recall, so when it comes to the remediation, because of that slag and like the toxic nature of that slag, was there, my understanding is that there was a requirement to remediate. Is that correct?
That's correct. Regardless of what the URA would have wanted to do with the site moving forward, there was still a requirement from the state, a consent order to remediate it.
Right. So the idea being that we had to spend the money to remediate it. Like people walk, it's totally toxic, but people should not actually be walking out on it. They do, but at any rate. But that was the idea of then if we're going to spend all this money to remediate this land, which we have to do, might as well go a little bigger and do an actual project and get something, do something worthwhile with the space.
Yep, that's absolutely correct.
Thank you. Any further first round? Just really quickly before second round, I'm both in favor of retiring a TIF early, putting land back on the tax rolls, large-scale solar, or I guess this might be medium-sized scale solar, whatever that looks like moving forward. And I just ask that in addition to working with Councilperson Warwick's residents, that there's so many people from the surrounding neighborhoods that utilize, even though they're not supposed to, they use it. There's trails there. And so that you work with the trail recreation communities to ensure that wherever that 15-acre spot is, that there's still access to, and connections to the trails that are used there.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll continue to do so. I think we are, when having public meetings, we certainly hear from trail users, but we'd be happy to connect with you further and make sure that we are, connecting with various organizations and individuals that have an interest in it for sure.
Thank you. All right, second round, Councilwoman Gross.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm really excited about the solar farm because I'm really enthusiastic about municipally owned utilities, right? And so, is this going to be a City of Pittsburgh solar farm?
I think that question, similar to the one that Councilman Mosley asked, remains to be answered. I think that municipally owned presents its own series of challenges that we'd have to work through, all of which I believe are made easier by the state adopting a functioning community solar program.
What is the difference between the many, many, many municipally owned power generation across the state of Pennsylvania that currently exist and have existed for a very long time, and community solar project, which is the phrase you keep using?
Yeah, community solar allows you to designate sort of, instead of putting the energy just back onto the grid with our current, grid as well as utility company here locally, community solar would allow you to designate specifically where that power is going and who the off-taker of the solar energy is, not just sort of putting it back on the grid.
So again, I always learn a lot from our constituents and residents in the city of Pittsburgh. So I'm just like using Google right now, and there is an entire association in Pennsylvania called the Pennsylvania Municipal Electrical Association, and those are literally like boroughs that generate their own electricity because it's cheaper for the residents of that borough than being a customer of one of the large utility companies. There are rural electrical, cooperatives, which are slightly different. And then, there's an entire Office of Municipal Energy in the city of Pittsburgh. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania also has a website on municipal opportunities for retrofits and energy, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not an expert in these things. There's a whole kind of discussion about publicly owned power. Specifically in Pennsylvania, Sustainable Pennsylvania has a municipal energy use archive. So this is an area that I think we should talk about more. We can see, if you look across the country, and I have done a little background reading on this, and I'm sure other members have as well, that there have been significant losses of a grid due to heat in Texas, due to overload in the Northeast, or to hurricanes in Florida, during now hurricanes even in the mountains of North Carolina, right? And so every redundancy of source and distribution is beneficial for climate change, for emergency use moving forward. I also always kind of in favor of, the city, especially since you said we've foregone, I don't know how many, I'm trying to add up how many millions of dollars in the 9 years or 11 years of the TIF. We're putting $4 million of our ARPA funds into specifically just the solar farm, I think I just heard, that I'd forgotten about.
The $4 million in ARPA funding will help contribute to remediating the entire site, which would include the acreage, the 55 acres roughly, that'll go into the Frick Park extension as well.
Right. Well, I'm happy to, we don't need to get all the answers on the table, and there certainly aren't all the answers available on the table right now, but I am going to be really interested in this, and I'd be advocating, since we've put so much significant resources of city taxpayer dollars and federal dollars into it on our own behalf, that this would be a beautiful municipally owned solar farm. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And would agree, do not have all the expertise at the table, but happy to continue to work with you and folks you put us in touch with on exploring concepts like that. Like I said, we have at least 2 years or so of remediation work before we get towards a solar project itself. So plenty of time to become better experts ourselves and move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilperson Warwick.
Yeah, just to your question, Councilwoman, Lily Friedman at the URA has really been doing a fantastic job connecting with the Swiss Home Park community. And in those meetings, she has talked quite a bit about ideas for incorporating, whether that's educational things around the solar farm so that like around it is it can also be used, right? As sort of whether that's a walking path or whatever. So definitely these ideas of making sure that you can still walk around it at least and maybe learn about it and how that might be incorporated into the overall park visiting experience. So
Thank you. Thank you. Any further discussion, second round? And I know community solar is something that those in favor of it have been trying to pass through the state for years, maybe even more than a decade. So maybe it's time for all of us to take a visit to Harrisburg on a number of bills, including community solar, if we want this to happen. All right. All those in favor of Bill 1036, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Affirmative recommendation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good day. Thanks for the work you do. You did great with that, Mike.
Take care, Dave.
We have exhausted our
You did
meeting
great. This is the
agenda.
first time you were here at the
We
table.
have
You did really good.
meeting announcements.
Where?
This afternoon at
Not-
2:30, Council will
Yeah,
hold a
Gina.
cablecast public hearing on Bill 2024-819 as it relates to zoning in East Liberty. Registration closes at 1 today. Next week, Council will hold their regular meeting and standing committees meeting on Tuesday, October 29th and Wednesday, October 30th at 10 a.m. respectively. Speaker registration will close at 9 a.m. the morning of each meeting. To register to speak at these meetings and hearings, please fill out the sign-up form on the council meeting webpage by the deadlines. You may also call the clerk's office at 412-255-2138. Anything from members? Council President.
Thank you. I don't make it a habit. I almost never respond to public comment that is made, but when completely inaccurate and false statements are made, I feel the need to be compelled to do so. So today, Mr. Lowe indicated, and this is not the first time this has been said, but since it's been repeated, I feel the need to correct the record, that there has been no affordable housing built in Manchester. That is simply not true. The last for sale units were completed in 2022. 6 for sale units with a listing price of $180 with the subsidies provided by the URA actually sold for $122. There were 3 units that had a sale price of $115 that ended up going for $57,500. There's also additional development actually being planned in partnership with Pittsburgh Scar House and some others in the Manchester neighborhood. It was also stated that there had been no community meeting regarding the Esplanade project. And just on my quick notes through my own schedule, and the first meeting I could find was June 11th, 2018, where the community was briefed. There was another one February 20 in 2019. There was another one November 8th in 2021. And I sat through a 2-hour meeting on February 2nd of this year regarding this development. And there will be additional conversations regarding it as well. And he's also stated that why would we potentially do this development? This will be coming before this body soon, so just sort of to educate us all, we are working on a TRID development for the Manchester Chateau area, and part of that package will be to actually leverage the Esplanade development and the taxes that incurs from it to actually fund an affordable housing fund for the Manchester neighborhood, so that we would actually be building more units directly in the Manchester neighborhood itself. But if that development doesn't happen, I don't then have the revenue to do those levels of affordable housing. So it all coincides and works together. So I just wanted to officially sort of correct the record from what was stated this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from members? Councilperson Warwick.
I do, and thank you for that clarification. I think too, just from hearing the comments from Mr. Lowe, just as a peripheral, I'm not familiar with any of the work around that, but I do think that this sort of raises the sort of long-standing issue that I know I see in my district with, like, who is the RCO? What is the RCO? What does that mean? And what is that, so you have these groups, and I don't know. it creates divisions, I think, in communities that don't need to happen sometimes. Whereas I think that, when we have, and specifically around these development activity meetings, that seems to be the primary issue around the RCO is who hosts the development activity meetings. And at the end of the day, this is just my, the city should be the one. I mean, we have a whole city planning department, right? And it should be that department that is hosting these development activity meetings in communities, so that it is not, so that, and then all the various community groups there may be big ones, there may be small ones, there may be different interests involved, and that they should all then be invited to those meetings. And I think that would maybe be a more equitable way to kind of get through these some long-standing kind of inter-community divides that we see sometimes with the RCO issue has come up, and at any rate, I know I've heard that in Mr. Lowe's comments as well. So
I'll turn it back over to Council President in case he wants to respond, and then Councilwoman Kale-Smith.
I do. I had not planned on having this conversation today, but it's since you brought it up regarding RCOs. As an example, I have 5 in the Hill District. And because of that, the city does run the meeting, because the city steps in when you have more than one RCO. The city steps in to run that process. I have recently had some conversations with members who have said the RCO ordinance has not functioned as it was intended for a very long time now. And should there be changes made to it? And one of the conversations was, what you're actually suggesting, Councilwoman, was should we create a system where you potentially do not have the RCOs, but rather you have a system where any development of, and I'm making this up for the purpose of the discussion, of 10 units or more, whatever it is, triggers a development activities meeting, but that meeting is then actually hosted by the planning department along with the council person, so that they can effectively get the word out, bring all organizations to the table respectively, and have an engaged conversation. And so I'm open to those conversations. I think a number of members are open to potential changes or to the RCO ordinance. So I just wanted to put that on the record, because it hasn't functioned and it has been more divisive in many parts of our city than I think it was intended to be.
Thank you. Councilwoman Kale-Smith.
Thank you. I'm glad you both brought it up, but I actually spoke to council members. I'm not done talking to council members, but I have the legislation ready to go next week that we undo the RCO, the whole legislation for next week. I think that actually, because of some of the concerns that people have brought up, I never liked the idea that we're giving one group some special privilege of information in the city of Pittsburgh. I think it should be anybody who wants to attend these meetings and wants to have a say in their community should have a say in their community. And so I feel like the RCOs have actually been detrimental to the public process, not a benefit to the public process. And I'll work with members on it and see what that process should look like, but we already have the legislation ready to go. But if there's any amendments or anything we want to change prior to introduction, I'm ready to do that. But I do think that it is something that, honestly, one of the people I know, a lot of people, she drives a lot of people crazy, I'm going to say this, but I love Marimba Malines and how she, speaks for the Hill. And I keep telling Dan Lavelle I'm going to take her on our side of town, because we need a fighter like that for us. But I don't care. I know that's a lot of, she gets a lot done up there, and she makes sure that, she's getting done with the community, seems to want. So anyway, and I think that but now she has 5 of her up there. It's like, I just don't even understand how you deal with that many people. Why not just have the public process instead of having an RCO? So I'll shut up about that. For me, I think we've not implemented it well, or something. Or it just, to me, I never liked the idea. If you recall, I think I voted against it in the first place. I never liked giving somebody a special privilege or a voice over somebody else. Whether I like those people or not, they have a right to have an opinion and have it shared.
Thank you. Councilwoman Warwick.
I think too, also just to because I don't want to give the impression that I am disparaging our RCOs. Like, they do a great job, right? But I do think too, sometimes these development activities meetings are can be a burden for the RCOs, because they're required to do them as part of being the RCO. And I have had situations where RCOs have been unfairly maligned because of, because they're hosting the meeting and then, oh, it wasn't, we didn't know, and how do we know? And then so these essentially all volunteer organizations are taking heat now from community members about a project that, that's really heat that the city should be, if there's a project that is controversial or whatever, that's really heat that the city should be taking, not that our volunteer community groups should be taking. And also sort of, ideas, and I again, these are things I've heard many times that, oh, the RCO is like in cahoots with the city to do something that we don't want, and I've heard all of these things, so I feel like, that's our job to own that stuff when people have concerns and whatever, not necessarily our local community groups, which are really just trying to, do nice things in the community. And anyway, at any rate, that's enough for me. Thanks.
Thank you. So I have Councilman Wilson, Councilman Mosley, and then after that, I think this is a big topic that deserves much more discussion. More than we can afford at the end of a long council hearing and a pre-agenda meeting. So I would recommend that we continue this conversation with one another and perhaps in the public forum at some point before we have any big decisions that are made. But clearly we're all thinking about this. This deserves more discussion. Councilman Wilson.
Sometimes I speak through trying to make a bad joke. So, this meeting has been quite a meeting. We have, took away the side yard program. Now we're talking about the RCOs going away. This has become quite a, less government is more type of meeting.
Maybe council going down to 5.
Yeah, this is something else.
Sneaker hit.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Councilman Mosley.
I'll be extremely brief, but I do think it is extremely, timely, discussion. I work, very closely with all the RCOs. In District 9 and have a great relationship, but I have seen, in my 10 short months on council that when there is, divisions in the community, oftentimes, the RCO, is at the center of it. And, sometimes folks are, are part of a RCO or even help, start the RCO, differences arise. And then now all of a sudden you have a faction in the community that wants to have a RCO in conflict, with the current RCO. And I've, had that, not that particular issue, but, in one of my neighborhoods, there is an individual that wants to, to start an RCO, and I've, resisted that because I don't want to participate in any potential, factionalism. I want to bring people together. And, so I think as the council president stated eloquently that there has been unintended consequences, with the current, the way that it is currently set up. And I know around the country, there's various models. And I know in certain cities, the city government actually provides resources for the RCOs where they can really operate. And I know at the most recent RCO meeting I co-hosted in one of my neighborhoods, our office, provided the food and drink because the RCO, didn't have any resources to provide food and drink. So I think it does, warrant, a much deeper conversation, not at the end of a very long-standing committee meeting. So I look forward to having conversations with the members and getting everybody's, perspective, to figure out how do we ensure that communities feel like their voice is heard and they are engaged when development comes into their community.
Thank you. Can I please get a motion to excuse the absent members, approve the minutes, and adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.